This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate fifth part of What If Naruto Was Trained by an Assassin. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
As they strolled through Tazuna's village, Naruto was unable to do anything but stare. As Team 8 and Team 7 carried on escorting Tazuna to his house, he muttered, "This is terrible." The village was about to fall apart. Many of the buildings were in need of repair, and people were moving slowly through the streets in tattered clothes and with depressing expressions on their faces. Youngsters were attempting to steal anything from people nearby or begging for food. Seeing a small girl begging for even a scrap of food made Sakura try not to cry too much. After Anko handed the girl some ration bars, she hurried off with the food. Tazuna appeared quite sober as she simply nodded. "This is the result of Gato moving in on our village. He's put a stranglehold on our island, and is bleeding it dry. There was no way we could stop him. We have no military, no defense force. We don't even have a daimyo, because our island is too small and too sparsely populated. Just a few fishing villages run by a head village. At least, until Gato came along and killed them," murmured he. Raphael surveyed the area slowly. "When I first joined the assassins, my mentor told me that Rome, the city we were in, was much like this when he first arrived. A cruel family known as the Borgia held all the power, and they had terrorized the population into submission. It took him quite some time to erode their power, and reclaim the city for the people. And we will do the same here," Raphael said. "Anko, Hinata, and Tazuna replied, "Thank you, but I don't know if it'll be that easy," as they quickly left the village and made their way to a row of houses situated on docks beside the beach. Before long, he reached one and slid the door open. He cried, "Tsunami, I'm home." Soon a woman in a blue skirt and pink blouse entered the dining area. Her eyes were brown, her hair was dark blue. She grinned, blinking, and hurried to give Tazuna a hug. She gave Tazuna a hug and exclaimed, "Oto-san, I'm so glad you're home." Grinning, Tazuna gave his daughter a hug before turning to look at the others. With a smile, he said, "Tsunami, these are the shinobi who came to protect me," shifting to one side as the Konoha shinobi went inside. Kakashi gave her a nod. He pointed to his students and said, "I'm Kakashi Hitaki, Junin of Konoha. These are my Genin students. Sakura Haruno, Sasuke Uchiha, and Kiba Inuzuka." As her students bowed and Anko nodded his head to Tsunami, she said, "And I'm Junin Anko Midarashi, and these are my Genin. Naruto Uzumaki, Ino Yamanaka, and Hinata Midarashi. As well as our own client, Raphael Cotres. Welcome. And thank you for protecting my Otou-san. I'm afraid though that we may not have enough room for all of you here in our house," Tsunami said with a bit of apprehension. "That's all right. My team has camping equipment. With your permission, we'll set up camp near your house," said Anko. "Though we would appreciate it if we could have our meals inside." Tsunami hesitantly replied, "Of course. Though I'm not sure if I'll have enough to feed everyone. It's hard to buy food with Gato controlling all the supplies that enter our village." Kakashi looked to Anko and said, "Don't worry, we also have some food. And we can see about getting more. I want Team 7 to settle in for the time being while I speak with Anko and her client," he said, though his posture gave the impression that he was speaking in a distant tone. All Anko did was roll her eyes. She muttered, "Fine," and turned to face her Genin. She led Raphael and Hinata outside and onto the dock across the water. "Hinata, Ino. You two will be sharing a tent with me. Get it set up. Naruto, you and Raphael will share a second tent," she said. Kakashi turned to face them after arriving. "All right, I want to know why Hokage-sama sent you and your team as my backup. We're facing off against rogue shinobi here, one of whom is a Chunin-ranked opponent. I would have expected at least a team of Chunin," he murmured. "Yeah, well Hokage-sama decided we were adequate. Especially after you confirmed Gato was the one behind the shinobi trying to kill your client," Anko replied. "Besides, with the Chunin exams coming up, our forces are stretched thin in preparation," she said. At that, Kakashi crossed his arms. "Fine then, why exactly are you here then, Raphael-san?" he inquired. Raphael looked at Kakashi. "I'm here to deal with Gato. There is plenty of evidence to warrant his removal as a threat to Konoha. I am here to make sure that happens. You? Why not simply ask me to do it? I am a former Anbu captain, and a highly skilled Junin," Kakashi replied. "Because you have a Genin team and your own mission to handle. Not to mention my specialty is the silent removal of people," Raphael replied simply. "And Anko's team is here to help me in any way I might need them to. This is what they're being trained to do anyway." Kakashi gave them a quick glance. "All right then. For now though, our best bet is to set up a guard schedule for Tazuna and his family, as well as possibly some training time. Keep our genin active and their edges up. Anko remarked, fair enough, warily observing Kakashi. He was concerned that this might be another attempt to recruit Naruto into his team, since she hadn't forgotten his attempts. Nevertheless, it would be wise for her genin to practice against others and assess their performance. More so in light of the approaching Chunin exams. Kakashi gave a nod. Well then, let's get to it, shall we? He responded. Raphael started to walk away, saying, you two handle that. For now, I think I'll wander the town, get a feel for things, but Anko stopped him by gently grabbing his arm. She grinned, but there was a trace of concern. Be careful out there. I'd hate to fail my mission. With a simple nod and a smile in return, Raphael left. Zabuza was currently lying motionless in his bed inside their hiding place, and Haku was keeping an eye on him, periodically checking the bandages and wounds on Zabuza. The door burst open at that very moment, allowing Gato and his two goons to enter. Gato smirked almost as soon as he saw Zabuza. He approached with a gloating expression on his face. So, this is the mighty Zabuza? The Oni no Kiri? Laid out low like some amateur? Now that Gato was standing over him, Zabuza just looked away from him and up at the ceiling. You're not worth the money I've spent on you, TCH, he uttered, gesturing to Zabuza's face. But an arm shot out and grabbed his arm. Haku gave Gato a fierce look as her usually kind eyes were blazing with rage. Her grip was so strong that it strained his arm. You will not touch Zabuza. Sama with your filthy hands, she snarled. Gato yelled, Gah! Get off me bitch! As his two goons readied themselves to brandish swords. But Haku materialized in front of them, their swords drawn, reversed, and pressed against each other's necks. I am not someone you wish to trifle with, especially with your second-rate goons, she responded. Gato glared at the kunoichi while clutching his injured arm. He yelled to his henchmen, let's go! As Haku dropped their swords. The trading tycoon turned to glare at Zabuza as they swiftly grabbed them and followed him out the door. He growled, kill the bridge builder, or else I'll get the Kiri hunter nin after you, and turned to walk away. As she shifted to Zabuza's side, Haku simply sighed and gave her a quick glance. He mumbled, that wasn't necessary, and gradually relaxed his hold on the kunai he was hiding beneath the covers. Perhaps not, Zabuza. Sama, but it was fun, Haku smiled calmly. With a silent sigh, Zabuza turned back to face the ceiling. At last, he said, Haku, I don't trust Gato. When you're not busy with me, I want you to keep an eye on him. I want to know if he's planning anything. Haku's eyes grew a little wider. She questioned, you think he will betray us? I can tell he has no love for shinobi or missing nin. Had we completed the contract already I wouldn't worry, but now, I want all bases covered, he said with simplicity. Zabuza. Sama, I get it, Haku replied. I will watch Gato for any sign of treachery. But what about the Konoha shinobi? Keep an eye out for them as well, Haku. Find out about the adults. The genin are nothing, he simply said. Haku picked up a medicine bowl and nodded. She dipped her fingers into the bowl of medicinal salve and started to apply it to one of his wounds. You will be done, Zabuza. Sama. For now though, please rest. I wish to ensure you make a full recovery as quickly as possible, she said. Next day, close to Nami no Kuni early in the morning, fog frequently covered the waters surrounding Nami no Kuni. In spite of this, Gato dispatched his goons on patrol ships to look for evidence of smugglers and other people trying to violate his regulations. At the farthest point of the patrol route, one of these patrol boats was currently operating in the eastern waters. The men on board were just hanging around, hardly even glancing out at the waters around them, because they could barely see anything due to the fog. Two of them were seated on the starboard side, which faced the open sea. Coiled into a frayed cloak, one of them moaned. What's the point of this? Nobody is bothering to sneak into Nami. There's nothing of worth sneaking in for, he replied. Yeah, well if some of the civilians are trying to smuggle goods in, we need to stop them, the other man replied. Boss's orders. We can't have some fishermen giving them hope. Yeah, but still, except for us, nobody is stupid enough to be in this fog, his companion grumbled, pulling himself closer under his cloak. After half an hour, as the fog was beginning to clear and the ship was getting ready to return to port, one of the lookouts gave a blink. I think I see something, he exclaimed, glancing eastward. The crew started to look east as well, blinking in an attempt to make out what appeared to be a dark patch of shadow. The shadow appeared to be approaching them as it grew bigger and darker over time. The boat's captain blinked and lifted a pair of binoculars to observe the shadow. His eyes widened in surprise and a hint of fear after narrowing slightly. He rang a bell and exclaimed, "All hands to action stations." As the shadow deepened, the thugs soon started racing to their battle stations, where they saw a big ship heading straight toward the patrol ship. But before the thugs within could respond, a sequence of panels along the ship's side retracted, exposing scorpions and ballistae. Each of them fired almost simultaneously, sending metal balls and large, piercing bolts flying toward the patrol ship's hull and crew. Along the deck, men were being torn apart by the projectiles, leaving internal organs and blood all over the place, leaving them dead or maimed. The small ship started to fill with water as the hull itself was torn apart in multiple places. The patrol ship did not survive because the larger vessel kept firing at a high rate of speed. A good number of the crew perished as the beleaguered hulk sank beneath the waves, leaving a few survivors to float on the surface amidst the wreckage. They would not, however, last long, for sharks would soon be there to feast on the blood that their fallen and injured allies had left behind in the water. Muki observed his crew on board the Rue. Same retract the weaponry and seal the weapon ports before nodding. There should be an empty cove along the north part of the island, he stated. Head up there, and then we'll begin scouting out the island. See what the situation is here, he told his men. They made their quick move as the ship changed direction, circling the island to the north. Amayuri watched the patrol ship's wreckage with a slight pout. While playfully fiddling with the hilts of her two swords, she muttered, "I was hoping for a bit of fun." Muki laughed. "You'll get some soon enough. If Gato's thugs are here, we'll probably have a fight on our hands." She gave a little giggle. "It's always you that finds the best places to vacation," she said, giving him a quick hug. The pirate captain gave a brief smile before it vanished. He uttered softly, "I can't help but feel it. He's here." He muttered to his crew, "And soon enough, we'll finally be able to end him." Amayuri asked him in a low voice, almost hesitantly, "And after that?" "Well, I don't know. I guess I'd talk to the crew, see what they want to do. We've been pirates for so long, I don't know if there is anything else we can or want to do. But what about you? Piracy can't exactly be a dream come true for you," he replied, now turning to face her. She merely smiled. "Are you kidding? The freedom of the sea, the chance for a good fight, loot and plunder? Not to mention a sexy captain to share a bed with? I should have taken up piracy a while ago," she grinned. "In fact, I think my only complaint are these clunky things I have to use for swords. Wish I knew what happened to my kiba blades," she said with a little annoyance. Muki gave that pout a small laugh. He said, "Well, I'll keep an ear to the ground, and maybe we can find them," and then he started to back away. "Now, look sharp. We need to get this ship hid away without Gato's men finding us. To your station, Miss Ringo." Aye, Captain," she greeted him with a smile over her shoulder as she turned and waited a little. He merely smiled and gave her what she requested, a swift pat on the back, which made her smile even more as she left. As the ship slid through the fog and headed north, Muki simply grinned and turned to face forward. The 6 genin were now arranged outside Tazuna's house, with Kakashi and Enko waiting in front of them to offer orders. "Okay, pay attention," Kakashi said. "Our mission while down here is to protect Tazuna and his family. Tazuna is busy finishing his bridge, so we'll need to divide our efforts. We will be rotating teams guarding the bridge and the family. At the same time, though, we will be training to counter potential threats. Currently we know that Zabuza Momochi and an unknown associate are out there, but there could be more." Enko started to throw in her 2 cents. With the Chunin exams coming up, she knew her team could take advantage of this. The training will mostly focus on working together to fight against a single, superior opponent. However, we'll also be pitting you against each other, among other things, she said. For today, Team 7 will be escorting Tazuna to the bridge, while Team 8 will stay with me to scout out the village and protect the family, Enko said. After Tazuna returns, our teams will train and spar. Understood? Tazuna left his house and the 6 genin nodded quickly, understanding. "Are you ready?" he inquired. Kakashi looked up at him. "Tazuna-san, my team will be watching over the bridge today," he stated. Enko turned to her genin as Tazuna departed with his escort. "All right, Ino and myself will stay here and watch the family. Naruto, Hinata, I want the 2 of you to scout out the village, see what you can find out about Gato and his thugs. But stay in the village until we know more." The 2 of them nodded. "Yes, sensei," gathered their belongings, and left. From an upstairs window, a dark pair of eyes watched them go, but neither of them noticed. Tsunami's son and Tazuna's grandson, Inari, practically glared at the young genin making their way to the village. When they had arrived the day before, he had gone for a walk and returned home to find, to his surprise, that people had set up tents outside his house. Tazuna had shown him the shinobi who had brought him home when he first entered. After saying a quiet hello, Inaru went straight to his room. Turning away now, he collapsed onto his bed, crossing his legs and encircling his knees with his arms. With an indignant scowl at his knees, he muttered, "Stupid jerks. They're just going to die." Raphael, meantime, was taking a bird's-eye view of the village to get a sense of its layout. There used to be a town hall in front of the village's central plaza. The tallest structure in the village, it featured a bell tower that could be used to sound an alert or call people to meetings. However, it appears that the town hall was boarded up and closed after Gato assumed power in the village because it was now against the law for the people to gather there. Raphael was hunched over in the bell tower now, trying to complete his mental map of the village. He turned and fell off the side with a few simple movements, grabbing onto the wooden tower's protrusions and sliding and dropping skillfully down the back side, out of sight for anyone to see. Before long, he was standing on the town hall's roof, and a short while after, he descended to an alleyway that ran parallel to the building. He straightened and brushed himself off before leaving the village. This was all the worse than it had appeared when they arrived. Gato was gradually eroding this village on the island by exerting a strangling grip over it. The store owners were compelled to raise the prices of the supplies they did have since they could only import goods through Gato from the mainland. Naturally, the inflated costs meant that very few, if any, of the villages could afford to purchase these supplies. The few fishermen and store owners who gave in and sold their services to Gato were the only ones who appeared to be doing well thus far. It was blatantly obvious that Gato was trying to erode the people's resolve even further. They would give in to put an end to their own suffering if they witnessed their neighbors, who were either employed or living comfortably in Gato. He knew that most of the villagers were about to give up when he passed by a group of them and saw the dejection on their faces. He could surmise that Tazuna's bridge promise was the only thing keeping them from moving forward. Gato's hold over the village would loosen if the bridge was finished. Other suppliers could cross the bridge to deliver their goods, and Gato was unable to attack them without inciting the wrath of the numerous daimyo and their shinobi villages. Furthermore, once the goods reached Nami, the merchants who sent them would have a stake in making sure that the locals and shopkeepers would keep purchasing them. As a result, they would employ mercenaries or shinobi of their own to keep Gato's thugs from destroying the goods once they were given to the shopkeepers. Gato would have to give up on Nami completely or face annihilation. Raphael was unable to comprehend Gato's intentions. He obviously wanted to create a maritime monopoly for his trading company by seizing control of numerous port towns. So why hadn't he done the same in the island ports of Mizu no Kuni and other similar islands? As far as they were aware, Nami was the first. Furthermore, why had he also attempted to establish himself in the villages that were hidden? Getting the information from Gato was the only way to find out. When Raphael noticed Hinata and Naruto close by, the former wearing contacts to cover her eyes, he stopped. He strolled over to stand close to them. Silently, he asked, "Find anything?" Naruto nodded, still studying the few goods a street vendor was trying to sell. Gato has set up his headquarters down by the docks. Hinata tracked a patrol of his thugs with her Byakugan, and saw them enter the warehouses down there. I sent a clone in as reconnaissance, and found the layout. One of the warehouses is being used as a barracks for his thugs. Another one near it is an armory, treasury, though Gato has the treasury locked down extremely tight, so even his own men can't get into it. There's also several patrol boats, and a couple of larger barges, obviously for ferrying his men and supplies around. Quietly, deciding against purchasing the items what he discovered. He didn't have extra money for these things, even though he wanted to help these people. I heard rumors though he has a mansion further in. The locals say it was a vacation home for a noble who abandoned it, and Gato simply moved in. Raphael asked, "Hinata, have you found it?" observing the girl shake her head. "No, not just yet, Raphael. Sensei," she muttered to herself. "It must be outside my Byakugan's range." The assassin mentor bowed his head thoughtfully and continued. "You two keep searching around town. Try to find out anything on those missing nin we fought, or anything else on Gato. I'm going to go look for that mansion. Try over by the west side of the village. There are a couple of bars over there, some of Gato's thugs might be hanging out there," he said. With a nod, the two started walking in the direction Raphael had indicated, and Raphael turned to face the docks. Eventually, one of his goons or Gato himself would probably take him from the warehouses to the mansion. He started walking quickly in that direction. Sakura was working on her chakra control at the bridge by assisting the crew building the bridge. Using the tree walking exercise, she had descended beneath the bridge to examine its underside for any cracks or weaknesses. Silently, She was charting everything she discovered on a bridge blueprint that Tazuna had given her. When she was done, she walked over the side and looked around the bridge. Tazuna oversaw a large number of laborers who were dispersed throughout the bridge when he wasn't working. While Kiba and Sasuke were watching the bridge, Kakashi was reading a book while perched on the railing. Tazuna set down a beam he was carrying as she hurried over with the map. She handed Tazuna-san the blueprint she had been using and said, "I just finished checking the bottom of the bridge." He accepted it with a small smile. "Thanks. I have to say, shinobi seem to be pretty handy as more than just bodyguards," he replied. Sakura simply smiled softly and flushed a little. "Thank you, Tazuna, but it wasn't really that much," she looked down and muttered. Tazuna opened her mouth, but one of the employees moved in. Quietly, "Tazuna. We need to talk." He went on when Tazuna turned to look at him. "Tazuna, I can't do this anymore. Gato's thugs have started threatening the workers and their families. If we keep this up, they're going to kill us all. I have to think about my family," he stated. "And you should be too. Haven't you lost enough already to Gato?" Tazuna narrowed his eyes in rage at the last line and stared at the employee. His demands were harsh. "So you're going to just give up? Let Gato walk all over you?" he exclaimed. "I won't let my family die or starve for this, Tazuna. If I work for Gato, my family will survive," the employee yelled. Tazuna simply turned his back and growled. "Survival isn't enough if you can't hold your head up high. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees," he said as he grabbed the beam. "Go now. I don't need collaborators and cowards working here," he uttered as he began to remove the beam. The employee first glanced at Sakura, then back at Tazuna. In a chilly, dark voice, he questioned, "You shinobi. Do you really think you can protect us?" Sakura turned to face the man, shuddering slightly in his wake. Then, attempting to appear brave, she squared her shoulders and closed her eyes. She said, "We're going to try," in the most assured tone she could muster. The employee gave her a quick glance before lowering the brim of his hat and turning to leave, his shoulders hunching as he went. As Sakura slumped her shoulders, the other workers watched him leave and then resumed their work. The sound of a voice behind her made her jump. "Well done, Sakura." Turning, she saw her sensei there, staring intently at his book. She gave him a little smile after blinking. "Thank you, Kakashi." "Sensei," she bowed in response. Kakashi gestured to Sasuke and Kiba with a simple nod. "Why don't you relieve Sasuke from patrol duty? Keep an eye out for anything suspicious," he simply replied. With a, "Yes, Sensei," Sakura turned to face her teammates. Kakashi started to think as she went along. Even though he didn't like the thought of Enko saving and standing by him, he had to acknowledge that this was a unique chance for him. He could demonstrate to Naruto how much better he was under his instruction by using the impending spars and training. He was almost positive that Sasuke's training regimen under his family's guidance and Kakashi's teachings would make him stronger than Naruto in a 1-on-1 taijutsu match, ensuring his victory. With Kakashi's formidable jutsu arsenal and Naruto's enormous chakra reserves, he felt confident he could prove to Naruto that studying under him would be the better option. That would enable him to instruct not just a member of Obito's clan but also his sensei's son. Kakashi was confident he could not only replicate his former team, but also surpass them, especially with Sakura joining the mix, as she was starting to resemble Rin. Perhaps even make them the next Sannin. He knew he could pull it off. He smiled to himself in his head as he turned the page of his book, knowing that everything would work out in due course. The western side of the village, under the influence of a henge, Naruto and Hinata discovered a small gang of heavily armed thugs and sat down in one bar. These were clearly Gato's men, since no one else in the village appeared to be carrying real weapons. Considering that the majority of people couldn't afford to waste money on drinks, the bar they were in was only about half full. The men at the bar were getting drunk quickly, so those who could stay silent avoided drawing their attention. This was advantageous for Naruto and Hinata, as they listened to them discreetly while feigning to sip some sake. "So did you hear?" one of them asked his friend, who nodded inebriatedly. "Those missing nins the boss hired failed to kill that bridge builder," he said. "Oh, I heard. He was pretty pissed, especially when that whore following Zabuza around nearly broke his arm. He was swearing all kinds of vengeance against them," said the friend. "I don't know why the boss just doesn't have us all attack the bridge builder's house. There's no way those shinobi he's got could handle all of us. We'd be done in no time, and he wouldn't have to waste money on those no-good shinobi," the first person said, and the second person laughed. "Are you serious? They'd cut us to pieces. I've seen shinobi in action before." "No, the boss has got a plan. You'll see," he replied. Another armed man burst into the bar at that very moment. He called out to the thugs, "Everyone back to the warehouses. We got trouble," and made them all look up. In an attempt to temporarily sober him up, the person who ran in smacked the person who had said, "What's that? What trouble?" The other thugs staggered out of the bar, followed by him. "We just found debris and bodies from one of our patrol boats. It looks like it was attacked and sunk. Gato wants everyone down at the warehouses now," he exclaimed before turning and fleeing. Hinata looked at Naruto, surprise visible in her brown eyes at the moment. "Who would attack one of Gato's patrol boats?" she inquired. When Naruto realized the solution, he smiled a little. He stood up and paid for his and Hinata's needs. "I think I know who. We should head back to Tazuna's place and let Sensei know we might have gotten more reinforcements," he remarked. The two hurried away, and as soon as they had finished changing, they were racing in Tazuna's direction. As the various thugs were rapidly forming a rough formation below, Raphael was lying face down on the roof of the warehouses, staring over the edge. A crew member hurried to the barracks warehouse when he witnessed a few small ships dock close to the warehouses. A short while later, another ruffian bolted into the woods. If there hadn't been a disturbance and the different mercenaries and criminals began congregating, Raphael would have followed. He chose to hold off and observe what transpired. Before long, he witnessed a short, stocky man wearing a business suit emerge from the woods, followed by the earlier thug and two other men. With a fierce glare, the short man leading the group, clearly Gato, brought himself over to the men gathered. He yelled to his men, "How did this happen? How was one of my patrol ships destroyed? I want answers." Speaking up was one of the thugs who had been on the ship that found the wreckage. He raised a waterlogged ballista bolt with a broken shaft and said, "We're not sure, Gato Sama. We think someone attacked it with a ship. One armed with weapons. We found some of these floating in the water." Gato turned to face all of the thugs, growling. The thugs started to hasten off as he yelled, "I want this island scoured now. Find this ship. Find anyone who might know about it. I want the ones who attacked my men dead. Do you hear me?" Raphael stood motionless while the thugs ran off to equip themselves and start looking. He smiled slightly when he saw what the broken ballista bolt, which had been thrown to the ground, meant. "You came here pretty fast, Mookie," he muttered as he moved cautiously away from the roof's edge. "In the long run, this might be very helpful for their plans." He heard everyone leaving, and he waited calmly while Gato yelled at them to hurry up. Gato was heard muttering as he stormed off with his bodyguards following after the last of the thugs had left. Raphael slowly raised his head, then quickly lowered it upon realizing there were no guards nearby. He took cover and watched the group go, then trailed behind from a distance. He knew that this was his best opportunity to locate Gato's main office as well. The three of them were strolling along a clearly made trail that cut through the island's forests. Following the path into the woods, Raphael moved cautiously so as not to create any noise that would draw their attention. His eyes narrowed as he registered what the two Ronin were. Both were dressed in hakama pants, one shorter than the other, and had on a beanie and hoodie. The other had an eye patch and was shirtless. Both carried katanas, but it was clear that neither was a skilled blade user. Every time he heard an animal noise, the tall one continued to grip the hilt and looked around. Raphael swore he could see bloodlust on the man's face, even at their distance. The three of them kept walking, totally oblivious to the shadow that was pursuing them. Every now and then, Raphael managed to overhear parts of their conversation and listened for anything significant. Gato told his goon, "The people of this island don't seem to know who they're dealing with. We might need to make another example, just like we did with that one fisherman. Help them to understand who owns this island." With his sword in his hand, Eyepatch questioned, "Maybe a beheading?" But Gato shook his head. He said, "No. Something worse. A fate befitting criminals." Yes, as they continued to move forward. A chill ran down Raphael's spine as he heard their exchange. His eyes narrowed, wanting nothing more than to walk out and kill Gato. However, not just yet. He required additional information, to know what Gato was planning and what backup plans he had. He continued to follow them until the forest opened up and he came across a mansion perched atop a cliff. As soon as he saw it, he pulled over into the woods to study it from a distance. He could see that it was encircled by a low wall, maybe no higher than 2 or 3 meters, and there was no indication that there was a walkway that guards could use to patrol. Before the mansion itself, there was a few meters of cleared space and a single, sturdy gate set in the wall. Gato and his goons broke through the gate, which was momentarily closed and then opened from the inside by 2 men. Raphael could only imagine that multiple men were inside monitoring the property and possibly the mansion's interior. On the rooftops, he could also make out a few figures brandishing little bows that were most likely no bigger than hunting bows. Although they wouldn't be very effective against someone without armor, Raphael was skeptical that they could pierce his leather armor unless it was extremely close to point-blank range. He looked at the space next to the wall. It was difficult for someone to approach covertly because it had been cleared of trees for several meters, especially with those rooftop sentries providing vantage points. It appears that the wall was constructed relatively close to the cliff, so it could be feasible to climb over the back wall and descend from that aside, depending on how severe the cliff is. He started to walk through the woods slowly in an attempt to see the other side of the mansion. He noticed a path heading down what he thought was the side of the cliff as the opposite side became visible. Sensing his chance, he started to retreat. There were two ways to get inside the mansion without being noticed, but both would probably need a boat. That's why it was critical to ascertain whether Muki and his team were nearby. When he was sufficiently away from the mansion, he started to walk faster, returning to the village and Tazuna's residence in the process. Late afternoon at Tazuna's house, teams 7 and 8 exchanged glances while Anko and Kakashi joined them in a clearing near Tazuna's residence, allowing them to see his dwelling. They had made the decision to use spars to gauge their genin's potential before taking further action. Anko turned to face Kakashi. Even though she could already sense one of the matchups Kakashi was hoping for, she asked, "Okay then, how do we decide who fights who?" "I believe that Sakura and Ino should fight, then Kiba and Hinata, and finally Sasuke and Naruto," Kakashi stated, grinning broadly at Anko. "That sounds fair, don't you think?" Anko gave him a look and then shrugged. She wanted to smirk, but instead she said, "Sure," her face staying expressionless. But Kiba gave a growl. He yelled angrily, "No way. I want to fight Naruto. Let the duck butt fight Hinata." Sasuke gave him a glare for his hair remark, and Naruto crossed his arms. "I don't mind fighting either of them," he stated neutrally, glancing at Kiba and Sasuke alike. Kakashi firmly stated, "Kiba, I do not want you fighting Naruto because of your rivalry with him. This is a spar, not a brawl," which caused Kiba to snarl in frustration. "Now, if Sakura and Ino will please get ready." The other genin started to step aside as Sakura and Ino assumed their fighting positions. Sakura appeared anxious, but Ino smiled encouragingly at her. Kakashi started establishing the guidelines. He looked at the two and said, "This is a spar. Taijutsu only. No ninjutsu, genjutsu, or weapons are allowed. Ready. Begin." Immediately upon Kakashi initiating the match, the two kunoichi advanced to confront one another. But it was obvious right away that Ino was the stronger player. Although Sakura demonstrated proficiency in academy style taijutsu through training and sparring with Sasuke and Kiba, Ino demonstrated her superior combat skills by consistently enhancing her taijutsu to match that of Hinata and Naruto. Anko noted that since their team's specialty was assassination, each member needed to be proficient in close-quarters combat in case their targets discovered them. As Sakura kicked her, Ino stepped in and pushed her leg away to throw her off balance. She grunted as she did so. Sakura attempted to retreat as Ino moved in to strike her in the chest, utilizing less force than she would have in a real fight to avoid seriously injuring Sakura. Sakura quickly grabbed Ino's arm and threw her away, but Ino spun around, landing face up and facing Sakura, who repositioned. With a further smile, Ino nodded to Sakura, who lunged forward and unleashed a barrage of blows that Ino either sidestepped or deflected. She moved swiftly to get under Sakura's protection once more. She struck Sakura's leg to knock her off balance before pushing her back and causing her to land face up on her back. Sakura immediately parried back after Ino delivered an axe kick to the ground. Ino then attempted to punch Sakura, but Sakura quickly parried back and spun around, kicking out at her. As Ino spun around and rolled back to her feet, Sakura leapt backward. The two squared off, trading blows once more until Ino's fortunate blow sent Sakura reeling. She moved swiftly to intervene, tripping Sakura, bringing her to the ground, and pinning her there. Kakashi moved forward and held up a hand. He declared, "Winner, Ino," as she slowly got to her feet and held out her hand to Sakura. She smiled and said, "You did great, Sakura," to which Sakura nodded, but her smile was a little weaker. Kakashi pointed to Hinata and Kiba and simply nodded. "Hinata, Kiba, you're up next," he declared. He stepped forward arrogantly and said, "Hey, this will be easy. Don't worry, Kakashi. Sensei, I'll win this for Team 7. Hinata narrowed her eyes and reached up to make sure her bandana was securely fastened. Slipping into her taijutsu stance, She silently engaged the safety switches on her hidden blade bracers to prevent them from setting off. You should check your ego, Kiba-san. It's promising things you won't be able to deliver on, she stated. Kiba simply grinned, sure of his win. All of Team 8 became tense as he said, hey. You can't do anything to me without your chakra. Your Juken won't work. Besides, what do I have to fear from some exile? Hinata's eyes narrowed even more. Naruto exclaimed, ooh, you're dead now, dog breath, and Anko simply grinned slightly. Kakashi was grinning too, thinking that Kiba would win out. He doubted Hinata could match his strength and speed, but he would still have them, along with the sharp claws he had gained from his beast mimicry jutsu. Especially considering that, as Kiba noted, Hinata would be at a disadvantage, he moved forward and gave the go, ahead for them to start. Striding forward at a full gallop, Kiba attempted to elbow Hinata in the chest in an attempt to take the wind out of her, but Hinata was nowhere to be seen. The former Hyuga had whirled away from his blow, and she struck his arm multiple times, seemingly with the Juken, as she turned around. But they could see that the Juken was not accompanied by any subtle chakra glow. Kiba growled as the two parted, oblivious to the slight numbness in his arm. He lunged at her once more, punching, but she deflected his arm, hitting him multiple times on the inside. She then slipped past him, hitting him along his rib cage and chest. Kiba turned to face her, growling. You think those love taps will stop me? He exclaimed, only to gasp in astonishment as his right arm suddenly stopped working and collapsed against his side. Before saying anything, Hinata just stood there and observed him. Those love taps, as you put them, have just struck a series of nerve clusters on your body that have rendered your arm and chest numb. Anko-sensei began training me in knowing where and how to strike the human body to disable it without the use of my Byakugan and Juken, in case I couldn't use my chakra. I'm skilled enough to numb your body parts, rendering you immobile. If Anko-sensei had been the one to do it, you'd be in excruciating pain right now, she stated, first of all. Kiba simply growled and swung his left arm at her, but she ducked under it and struck him along the arm, numbing his left arm all the way down to his side. As Hinata saw him glare and his arms droop at his sides, she stepped back. She turned and left after saying, the Hyuga may have banished me, Inuzuka-san, but do not think for 1 second that makes me weak. Never underestimate an opponent, Inuzuka-san. Surprised, Kakashi just stared before he spoke. He declared, Hinata Mitarashi wins, and Naruto gave Hinata a shoulder pat while Anko merely grinned. Meanwhile, Sasuke slightly squinted his eyes. He knew Hinata was strong, but he also knew that beneath the loud, haughty demeanor of his teammate, he was a master of taijutsu. He wasn't prepared for Hinata to defeat his teammate with such ease. He cast a quick glance at Kakashi, who gave him a nod. Naruto and Sasuke both moved forward and fastened their bracers' safety fasteners. Kakashi moved to referee as the two faced each other. He said, "Are you two ready?" They both nodded silently while observing one another. Although Sasuke was aware of Naruto's skill as a fighter, Sasuke thought he had the advantage. In addition to working hard outside of the academy and during team training, he had been trained by Kakashi Hatake, who many believed to be the next strong contender for Hokage due to his remarkable background and skills. In the meantime, Naruto was aware of Sasuke's quickness and agility from past battles. He would be able to move swiftly, strike, and retreat. If Naruto wanted to win this battle, he would need to try to pin him down. After glancing at them, Kakashi nodded. "Start," he yelled. The two genin took up their positions and studied one another intently. In an attempt to ensure that Sasuke didn't gain the upper hand, Naruto followed suit as Sasuke started to slowly advance to his right. Sasuke moved to his left right away, and Naruto attempted to follow suit but faltered a little. Sasuke took advantage of Naruto's imbalance and advanced with a right hook, leading. However, Naruto smiled, having baited Sasuke with the stumble. With lightning speed, he grabbed Sasuke's arm and pinned it while striking his chest and chin. He then released the hold as he delivered a second blow, which caused Sasuke to be thrown back due to the force of the blow. Naruto charged forward, kicking Sasuke in the face as he staggered backward, muttering and clutching his chest. After knocking Naruto's foot away, Sasuke attempted to punch him once more, striking his cheek and sending him reeling. He swiftly returned fire with a few more punches before launching himself into the air and kicking Naruto. By grabbing Sasuke's leg and twisting it, Naruto was able to block the quick move and send Sasuke crashing into the ground. Despite losing all of his energy, Sasuke was still able to kick back and push Naruto off his leg. The Uchiha staggered upright, and Naruto shook his head, getting ready once more. Anko looked at Kakashi as the two faced each other, and observed that he appeared a little tense, his one open eye fixed on the fight. Compared to the previous two fights, it appeared that he was much more engaged in this one. She scowled slightly, speculating as to why he would be drawn to this bout. She returned her focus to the fighting as the two came into contact once more. Trying to quickly retaliate, Naruto grunted as he blocked another blow from Sasuke. However, Sasuke dodged the blow and punched Naruto in the stomach. With a grunt, Naruto retreated, but not before reacting swiftly to deflect another blow from Sasuke, charging in to strike Sasuke in the chest. Naruto punched Sasuke again as he staggered back, aiming higher this time and striking Sasuke in the face. He then leapt up and drove both of his feet into Sasuke's upper chest, sending him flying. Naruto leapt back onto his feet, getting ready, and Sasuke grunted as he hit the ground and attempted to stand up as fast as possible. With breathless looks, the two turned to face Kakashi, who then moved forward. With a neutral tone, he declared, "That's enough. I'm declaring this a draw." Sasuke snarled as Naruto simply lowered his posture. He stepped forward, snapping, "I can keep going," but Kakashi stopped him. "I don't doubt you can, but we are in the middle of a mission. If this match goes on any further, one of you will get seriously hurt, and we cannot risk that." "Understood," he replied. After giving him a brief glare, Sasuke nodded and moved away, giving Naruto another glare in the process. Naruto simply sighed, taking a step back, rubbing his chest, and wincing. Anko approached to check on him, and Kakashi followed suit for Sasuke. Before the figure turned and departed, bouncing from tree to tree, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the tops of the trees. Haku knew those two genin she had just watched fight could pose a serious threat if they got into another altercation as she was leaving. It might be necessary to deal with them permanently. Shaking her head, she hurried back to the hiding place to tend to her master. "Salutations to you, Kuni." When two figures entered the western part of town's bar, nobody seemed to notice. However, the few customers there seemed more content to sip their drinks and brood about their personal issues. After purchasing a bottle of sake for themselves, Muki and Amayuri found a quiet corner of the bar and started to carefully pour the sake into cups. Muki took a slow sip from his and started talking. He whispered, "Did you see the thugs roaming the streets?" Amayuri simply sat back and nodded. "Yeah. There are a lot of them here. I'd say it's very likely we found Gato's current base of operations." "Yeah. Now we just need to find Gato," Muki uttered before changing his mind in response to a newcomer to the bar. The individual had on a fisherman's outfit, covering his features with a wide, brimmed conical hat. His clothes, like many in Nami, were tattered and old. He discreetly set down a few coins on the bar, grabbed a bottle of sake, and took a seat at the table across from Amayuri and Muki. The fisherman poured himself a drink and then, with a low voice, addressed the two. He raised his head to reveal Raphael's face and said, "You're an awfully long way from Mizu, aren't you, Muki-san?" The two relaxed at the sight of the assassin, and Muki smiled. He said, "Raphael-san, it's good to see you," to which Raphael responded with a small shake of his head. He said, "Not here. Finish your drinks and then head towards the north part of town. I'll meet you at the outskirts a half hour after you leave," before returning to his drink. The two pirates exchanged a quick look, then shrugged and resumed their quiet conversation while drinking. After finishing, they obeyed Raphael's instructions and left the bar. Within 30 minutes of their arrival, Raphael joined them, simply walking by and giving them a subdued signal to follow him. Raphael looked to make sure they weren't being followed as the two went. "It's good to see the both of you. I take it you got my message about Gato being here?" he responded. "Obviously, or else we wouldn't be here," Amayuri remarked sarcastically, while Raphael merely grinned. "I've confirmed that Gato is here. He's in a large mansion on the east side of the island," he said. "I've also found a possible point of infiltration, which I can use to sneak into the mansion. However, in order to be successful, I need the aid of a boat or ship," Raphael continued. Muki gave a headshake. "Why not just storm the mansion? We wait till we confirm Gato is in there. My men sneak up to the mansion in the dead of night, and we attack the place. We'll be able to overwhelm the guards and kill Gato before he knows what is going on." "A good plan, with one small complication. Gato has hired at least 2 missing nins, one of them a Junin with the other being of unknown skill and ability. I'm sure you're familiar with the Junin, Amayuri," he said, turning to her. "It's Zabuza Momochi." At that, Amayuri tensed up and let out a soft growl. "Zabuza. The one who started it all, and destroyed the 7 swordsmen," she said. "We don't know where he is. All we do know is he's recovering from the fight against our 2 Junin. He could be in the mansion, and if we attack, he'd massacre your crew, Mookie. No, for now we should infiltrate the mansion, learn what information we can, he said with simplicity. Mookie gave a quiet nod. Alright, what do you want to do exactly? We'll use a boat to slip around to the cliff near the mansion, at which point I'll climb up that side and slip into the mansion. After I gather what information I can, I'll return to the boat, and we'll leave, he stated. Simple as that. A simple plan. Good. Those have less chances of messing up on us, Amayuri replied. When do we begin? Tonight, if it's feasible, stated Raphael. I want to get this done quickly. Mookie came up with a map. Very well, here's our ship's location. Meet us here in the evening and we'll head out as soon as you're ready, he replied. Taking the map, Raphael nodded. All right, good luck to you too, he said as he left, tucking the map into his shirt. Amayuri grinned as Mookie and she watched him leave. She said, so, let's go get ready then. We've got an exciting night ahead of us, as the two set out. Meanwhile, Anko smiled and looked at Ino while she twirled a senbon needle around her fingers in the woods outside Tazuna's house. She said, okay, Ino. I think this will be a great tool for you to use, and threw it to Ino, who struggled to catch it and nearly dropped it. The senbon needle. It's small, light, and can be deceptively lethal if you know exactly how to use it, she continued. Ino blinked as she examined it. She questioned, how is this lethal? Normally, it's not unless you strike vital points, and even then that's damn near impossible, Anko stated. Course put one of these through a person's eye, or enhance it with wind or lightning chakra and strike the heart or neck, and you've got a different story. But no, these are designed more for incapacitation. Like what our fake hunter nin friend did with Zabuza, she stated, grabbing a second one. They hit Zabuza right in the neck, at a nerve point that simulated death. Strike elsewhere in the body, and the pain and blood loss leads to them being weakened. But, while the needle itself isn't necessarily lethal, it can be made so with a few additions, she said while opening a bottle. Blinking, Ino saw that Anko had dipped the senbon needle into the bottle and was holding it there for a short while. In case you haven't realized yet, this is poison, said Anko. Senbon needles are perfect for delivering poison to a target, and killing or incapacitating them. Launch a barrage of these at an enemy, and they'll be dead or unconscious in 2 minutes flat. Unless you're being stealthy and want a slower acting poison, she stated. Anko smiled as Ino's eyes grew wide. With the senbon needle out and the poison bottle put away, she asked, this is part of why I wanted you on my team, Ino. Your knowledge of plants and herbs means you've got a head start already on studying and using poison. What do you think? Ino gazed intently at the needle. I guess that makes sense, she remarked, recalling some of the lessons her mother and father had taught her about various flowers and plants. Even which ones were lethal. Anko smiled and put the needle back. She pulled out a scroll and unsealed a small set of 5 tubes with straps mounted underneath and strings attached to one end. Perfect. Now obviously it'll take lots of practice before you get good enough to use senbon needles by hand, so instead, we'll start you off with one of these, she said. This is a senbon launcher. Completely undetected if worn under a sleeve. In your case though, we'll wear it over the sleeve, for now. Hold out your arm. Anko strapped the launcher to Ino's left arm as she extended it. The launcher is spring-loaded, so you push the senbon needles into each tube, and it'll lock the launcher for each tube in place. Then pull the string for the tube to fire. We'll start with normal senbon, till you have experience with poison, she explained. Anko gestured to a tree while Ino adjusted it slightly to feel more at ease. Hit that target, and let's see how you do, she instructed. Before firing, Ino raised her arm and tried to aim, shifting in position. Sasuke was grunting somewhere else, his forehead glistening with sweat as he practiced different kata against a tree trunk. He had been trying to release his frustration by practicing for a while. How Naruto had been able to stay up with him in the taijutsu battle was beyond him. He was a Uchiha who had received training in the Uchiha's recognized fighting technique. Kakashi Hatake, one of the most well-known Junin in the village right now, was his teacher. Compared to others in his year group, he ought to be light years ahead. Nevertheless, Naruto had kept up with him yesterday. It was certain that he wasn't stronger, but he also wasn't inferior. He was even with Sasuke, and the young Uchiha could not understand how this boy from a nearly extinct clan, with a worse teacher, could possibly keep up with him. It drove him crazy. With a growl, he struck the tree with his hand, then withdrew and shook his bruised knuckles. Even though he heard Sakura approaching, he didn't look up. Sakura mutely said, "You should get some rest." Obviously, she spoke more for him than for the mission when she said, "If you push yourself anymore, you could hurt yourself." And that would be bad for the mission, but she also knew she had to sound professional. Sasuke simply scowled and began to kick while keeping his attention on the tree. He grunted and said in a neutral voice, "I'll be fine," kicking the tree. Sakura bit her lip and shifted to the side so that he could catch a glimpse of her out of the corner of his eye without hitting her. She questioned, "Do you need a sparring partner?" "No," with a grunt. Sasuke continued to kick the tree. He said, a little harshly, "And even if I did, I would prefer Kiba. He can keep up with me," showing signs of growing frustration. Sakura appeared a little dejected at that. She said to him, Oh, well, could you maybe help me then? If you can help me grow stronger, I'll be less of a weak link, yes?" At that point, Sasuke paused and turned to face her. A part of him understood her words and acknowledged her accuracy. Their weakest member determined how strong their team was. Sakura was showing promise in genjutsu and chakra control, but her taijutsu was currently lacking. Skills that Sasuke was aware he needed to improve. However, he also believed that it would be a waste of time to assist her and that he should be concentrating on his own training. To restore the Uchiha to their former glory, he had to gain strength. In order to defend the clan and apprehend the assassin of his father, uncle, and other victims. Sakura moved slightly as she felt Sasuke glare at her. Until he spoke, she was afraid he would turn down her offer. "Excellent," he remarked. "In return, perhaps you could help me with my chakra control." "It still needs some work," he replied. Sasuke moved away from the tree, and Sakura grinned and nodded. "Take up your combat stance," he commanded. She couldn't help but feel happy and warm as she was doing it. She would demonstrate to Ino Sasuke's lack of evil. All he had to do was let people in. Meanwhile, Kakashi was at the bridge supervising the bridge builder and his employees alongside Kiba, Naruto, and Hinata. He appeared composed from the outside, but within he was thinking back on the day's events. He had not anticipated how the fight would turn out. Because of Sasuke's almost obsessional training regimen and his own personal instruction, he had thought that Sasuke was better at taijutsu than Naruto. However, Naruto had managed to compel him to declare a draw before they seriously hurt one another. How had Anko forced him to become so powerful? To him, it made no sense. He looked up from his book at the boy with the blonde hair and tried to come up with another plan to win Naruto over. Could he perhaps make the boy an offer instead? Maybe a ninjutsu? He was aware that Naruto could use both fire and wind, and that since wind is so uncommon outside of Kei's no Kuni, it would be difficult for Naruto to find a suitable tutor. He grinned as he considered the one jutsu he could teach Naruto. The Shinku Taigoku, Great Vacuum Sphere, is a C-ranked wind ninjutsu, but with the right mastery, it can be extremely effective. 1. He simply grinned and walked up to Naruto after putting his book away. "Hey Naruto, may I speak to you for a moment?" he inquired. Looking up, Naruto blinked and then shrugged. He asked, "What do you want, Kakashi?" "Sensei?" As some of his shadow clones passed by, bringing supplies Tazuna and his team required. Naruto had given Tazuna clones to replace the men who had quit due to fear of Gato because Tazuna had jumped at the chance to make up for the losses his workforce had already suffered. Kakashi just grinned at him with his trademark eyes. He questioned, "You've got a wind affinity, right?" Naruto nodded, and he went on. "That's a pretty rare element in Hai no Kuni. You probably won't find many people who can teach you ninjutsu for that element, outside Asuma-san, he stated. Slowly and slightly confused, Naruto just nodded. "Yeah, but Anko. Sensei already mentioned working something out with him. She thinks I could learn a lot from Asuma regarding my wind affinity," he replied. Naruto thought that would be helpful, so he was actually looking forward to that because Anko had told him about Asuma's use of his wind ninjutsu to increase the power of his weapons. He had the ability to direct wind chakra into his hidden blades or sword to increase their stabbing or cutting force. That caused Kakashi to scowl in his head, thinking he might need to speak with Asuma when they returned to Konoha. On the outside, he was just grinning. "Well, that's good. But you know, I've got a few wind ninjutsu I've copied over the years. I could teach you a couple, if you like." At that, Naruto blinked. Thanks, sensei," he inquired, perplexed as to Kakashi's motivation for instructing him. Kiba heard them as he was walking across the bridge and said something at that precise moment. "What the heck, sensei? Why do you want to train someone else from another team? Shouldn't you be teaching us ninjutsu?" He was furious. Grinning, Kakashi raised his hands. Now Kiba, I'll be happy to teach all of you some ninjutsu too after you show me you can work as a team. Besides, there's nothing wrong with helping fellow Konoha shinobi, is there?" he inquired. Naruto turned, sighed, and went back to work while Kiba simply snorted and stormed off in an angry manner. Meanwhile, back on the shore, Hinata had taken up a watchful stance, hiding among the tree's limbs with her bow out and an arrow ready to be pulled. Occasionally, she was scanning the area for intruders with her Byakugan. She did it again now, but this time she blinked and scowled upon seeing someone. It appeared to be a young woman, perhaps not much older than she was, collecting herbs while donning a pink unisex kimono. If there were two things about this, it wouldn't be suspicious. To start with, it appeared that the woman was observing them closely, as she frequently glanced in their direction. Perhaps she was studying the shinobi, or perhaps she was observing the bridge being constructed. Hinata was unable to say for sure. But from what she could see, the girl's chakra coils were well developed, with at least Chunin or higher chakra levels. As Hinata gathered more information, she saw that the young woman also shared the same color hair as the imposter hunter Nin who had saved Zabuza. The girl also had matching nail polish. After realizing this, Hinata's eyes grew wide, and she turned to raise her bow. With the prearranged signal, she drew back the arrow and shot it high into the air. While it was visible to those on the bridge, the trees in the forest prevented someone else from seeing it. When Kakashi and Naruto noticed the arrow, they both tensed up in their minds, realizing Hinata was alerting them to an intruder. Kakashi simply gave Naruto a smile. He walked off with a casual demeanor, saying, "You keep working here. I need to go handle some business, if you know what I mean." Hinata moved cautiously and slowly through the treetops, circling around the girl's position and carefully jumping onto solid branches to minimize disturbing the leaves. Before long, she was to the girl's left and behind, and she started to move closer in an attempt to get a shot at the bow. Although she could have likely made the shot from where she was originally hiding, she wanted to attempt to apprehend the girl in order to obtain information. After a short while, she located a spot and knelt down, steadying herself gradually while drawing back her arrow. As she steadied herself and aimed, she felt something beneath her give way. A rabbit that hops onto a branch. The moment Hinata released the arrow, the girl snapped to attention, seeing not only the rabbit but also the arrowhead's flash of sunlight. Hinata dropped to the ground quickly, drawing a second arrow from the storage seal on the bow and getting ready to shoot when she saw the girl disappear in a shunshin. She threw herself to one side, avoiding the arrow. As Kakashi landed close to the abandoned basket, Hinata came over to join him and take her arrow. A lot of these seemed to be medicinal herbs. I take it that was Zabuza's accomplice? Hinata responded. The former Hyuga nodded and collapsed the bow, putting it in her back holster after putting the arrows away. I believe it was her. She had a few similar physical characteristics to the hunter Nin, as well as a large chakra pool. And her escape obviously was that of a well-trained kunoichi. Kakashi picked up the herbs and murmured, "So she was gathering herbs to help heal Zabuza of his wounds and spying on us. Interesting. We'll inform the others after Tazuna is done for the day. For now, we'll return to watching over him." "Yes, sensei," Hinata replied as she trailed behind him back to the bridge. Haku, in contrast, was breathing heavily, although more from adrenaline than from genuine fatigue. It was terrifying how close she had come to failing her master and getting caught there. However, she had managed to flee, albeit without the necessary herbs. She frowned, realizing that she would need to get more quickly. She would have to rest for the time being and exercise more caution afterwards. She made her way to their hiding place, making sure no one was trailing behind. Kumo no Sato, with one arm pumping iron and the other reading a report from his desk, the Raikage grunted softly. In the years since Yugito's desertion and the murder of one of his most capable strategists, not much had changed. Even though there were more stringent security measures in place, village life continued as usual. But he had not forgotten, and he was still making plans to elevate Kumo to a position of prominence in society. Rumors were still circulating that could provide him with the opportunity to attack Konoha and the abandoned Yugito. Kumo was unable to avenge Konoha, even though it was clear from her presence in Konoha that they were the ones responsible for the incident. Not with the knowledge of Kumo's dark secrets they presumably possessed from Yugito and the operative who had broken into the village. But now was their chance. After putting down his weights and finishing reading the report in front of him, he grinned. The confirmation that the Kazekage had been meeting with Orochimaru, the renegade Sannin of Konoha, came from one of his spies in Suna. He did not know every detail of their meetings, but when a man who despises Konoha gets together with a village that is slowly being bankrolled by the same village, there's a good chance that something significant is about to happen. And intended to make the most of it. Reaching out to his secretary Mabui, he pressed the button on his intercom. "Have my strategists and analysts report to my office immediately," said the president. At one of the training grounds, 3 Kumo genin were occupied with their training. That is, Two of them were in training, and the third one was sitting close by. Omoi, a boy with dark skin and white hair, raised his gaze from sharpening his sword. "So you two hear that there was a sighting of Yugito Ni near the border?" he inquired. "You don't think she's going to infiltrate Kumo, do you?" One of his two teammates, Karui, a red-haired, dark-skinned kunoichi, grunted as she practiced her stances by slashing her katana at her training dummy. "If she does come here, Sensei will put that bitch down for good. Traitors like her deserve to die," she stated. Beside her was a fair-skinned blonde with a chilly demeanor, brandishing a tanto. Omoi talked beside her. He said, "What do you think, Samui?" Samui eventually spoke in a chilly tone as she continued to attack her own dummy. She stabbed the dummy with her tanto and said, "It doesn't matter what I think. What matters is she's an enemy of Kumo, and will be dealt with, permanently." "Salutations to you." Kuni, a boat crept along Nami's coast, its rowers making as little noise as possible with deep, slow strokes. Muki and Raphael were crouching in the boat, in addition to the two men rowing. The moonless night ensured that no light reflected off the water and gave away the boat as they approached the cliffs upon which Gato's mansion sat, making it the most perfect night possible. Casting a quick glance up at the precipice, Raphael adjusted his boot-spiked attachments and a pair of gloves with spikes on the palms. "It ought to be enjoyable," he muttered. Muki muttered, "You can use chakra, so why don't you use that?" Raphael gave a quiet laugh. The boat moved as close to the cliff face as it could go. In a world where shinobi constantly use chakra, you start to expect it. And as such, defenses are built around detecting or negating chakra. "No, that's a last resort. If I can get in traditional ways, I will," he said. He reached out and grasped the rock face, saying, "I'll give you the signal when I'm coming back." Raphael started to climb, clinging to rocks when he could and jabbing his claws into the rock when needed to stay above the water as Muki ordered his men to shift the boat off a little. He moved steadily upward, trying to make as little noise as he could. He was hanging by his hands at one point because he couldn't get his boot claws into the surface as the cliff started to push outward. Sensing the strain on his arms and glove claws, he chose to take a chance and channeled chakra to his feet, attaching them to the cliff face while he ascended gradually. It took him 30 minutes to reach the precipice, where he stopped. He cautiously grasped the cliff's edge and raised himself just enough to get a glimpse over the edge. He looked around slowly, noticing the wall surrounding the mansion, a few meters of open space, and a lone thug carrying a bow patrolling the area. With his back to him, Raphael watched the thug with wide eyes as he walked away from him. He moved quickly to the wall, leaning against it as he did so, slipping over the edge like a shadow. After a short while, he hurried down the wall in the direction of the guard. The thug on the wall was walking around in silence, moaning with boredom. He turned to look around for the source of the noise and stopped when he heard what sounded like soft scraping noises. Just then, a hand shot up, snagging him by the collar, pulling him down, and bashing him against the wall, knocking him unconscious. Silently, Raphael slipped over the wall and set the guard on the walkway. He smiled when he discovered a flask on the man and opened it to discover a rather unpleasant alcohol smell inside. He gave the impression that the man was intoxicated by holding him up and spilling some of the flask's contents on him. "Perfect," he remarked. Having resolved that, he descended into the grounds and started to stealthily approach the mansion. It was a building of at least 3 stories, filled with windows all around. In quiet pursuit of an entrance, Raphael made his way to the mansion's west side. Experience had taught him that most mansion layouts were pretty standard. The occupant's workspace and bedroom would be located in the east or west sections. He had a 1 in 2 chance of finding Gato's office area if he started there. He arrived at the ground floor windows and peered inside, only to have to duck as a guard passed by. He crept slowly up and peered inside before dropping down when he noticed multiple guards smoking and engaging in a number of games of chance. It looked like some kind of break room, and he didn't think Gato would sleep over security. He crouched silently and moved to the east side of the mansion. He discovered the ground floor room was unoccupied when he went over there, so he carefully unlocked the window by inserting a small knife into the latch. Then he carefully slid into the space before shutting and locking the window behind him. Peering around, he discovered that he was in a sort of lounge that had 2 doors. One would lead into the hall, and the other, on this side of the mansion, probably connected to the room at the front. He moved to the door that opened into the hallway and knelt down, listening with an ear pressed to the door. He just listened for 10 minutes, feeling for any sounds, and then he slowly opened the door just far enough to get a glimpse. There was no sign of any patrolling guards. The hallway was empty and dark. With deliberate slowness, Raphael closed the door behind him and moved to a hallway intersection, leaning against a corner to take a quick look around. Seeing the back of a thug there, he withdrew and silently started to evaluate the situation. He might draw the man toward him in an attempt to kill or knock him unconscious, but if other guards were stationed beyond this thug and they noticed him missing, that could get dangerous. He could attempt to get around him in another way, but that would just take up more time and guards. Thus, Raphael chose the third option. He carefully took out a small rock from one of his pouches and threw it down the hallway, letting it clatter on the floor and strike a chair before sliding behind a hallway table. When the thug he had encountered heard the noise, he turned to look into it. He looked around, perplexed, as he entered the hallway that Raphael was in, then turned to face the location of the noise. With the confused guard trailing behind, Raphael took advantage of the moment to steal stealthily and quickly enter the previously guarded hallway. Raphael followed the new corridor to the main entrance, where he slipped into an alcove in the wall and started to wait. When the guard failed to materialize after a few minutes, he slipped up the stairs leading to the next floor in the entranceway. He turned to head towards the east wing at the next level and started walking down that hallway. His eyes blinked with surprise when he saw no more guards. If the footsteps above his head were any indication, Gato seemed to be only concerned with keeping an eye on the ground floor and the area outside his own bedroom. Nevertheless, he moved quietly, exploring the rooms he found. Up until he found the last room, the majority of them were guest bedrooms and similar spaces. The room was spacious, featuring a desk and several maps affixed to the walls. Raphael slid through the door and locked it behind him. Before beginning work, he shut the curtains and lit a tiny candle. He then turned his attention to the wall-mounted maps. It appeared that the first wall had anything to do with his work at Gato Industries. The elemental nation's ports and trading outposts were marked on the map, and each one had a number next to it. Raphael looked at them, then brushed it off. It dealt with the productivity of the locations, stating the quantity of cargo ships and transport caravans that were available at each location. He looked at the other map, and his eyes got big. The towns shown on the map were different, but it was still of the elemental nations. There was no obvious advantage for some of them as trade routes. Furthermore, lines connecting the towns indicated paths that went directly between them, stopping at the capital cities of each nation and ending at the shinobi villages. Raphael studied the map, blinking in bewilderment. Quietly, why would you care about these towns? He questioned, taking out a scroll and beginning to draw a map. He considered the question as he went. Gato had no rightful connection to the shinobi villages that were hidden. To save costs and support the village's finances, each of them had a private civilian mercantile guild that conducted business with other groups, but they typically took care of their own transportation as well. To help show off the abilities of the village's shinobi and to further reduce expenses, they would even employ one of their own shinobi for guard duty. Given this, why would Gato be interested in towns' routes leading to the hidden villages? His eyes widened as he caught sight of something else. Then he looked up once more, observing the board. It appeared as though every path led back to Tetsu no Kuni, or the Land of Iron. Raphael turned to the desk after finishing the sketch quickly and adding a question mark next to Tetsu no Kuni. He hurriedly started going through the drawers and rummaging through the documents. The majority of them contained documents pertaining to Gato's industries, which didn't really help him. He did find a few things intriguing, though, including drug dealing and the sale of weapons on the black market, mostly through buying and selling, as well as a few other illicit activities. Swiftly creating a shadow clone, Raphael silently expressed gratitude to Anko for teaching him this method and raising his chakra levels to the point where he could create a minimum of one clone. Raphael continued to search through the drawers as the clone got to work copying down the illegal documents. When he saw nothing more, he pivoted and examined the remaining space. Raphael moved toward the two bookcases in the office and began to look through the books. Following a 15-minute inspection, the first one turned out to be a standard bookcase stocked with books. But the second one showed something more intriguing. As he pulled on one book and watched a row of them swing out, Raphael sighed. He muttered, "Talk about cliched," and noticed a safe with a key lock behind them. Taking out a lockpick, he silently got to work and managed to open the safe in no time. He grinned as he opened it and discovered multiple documents. He took them out and placed them down, examining the first one. His eyes widened and then narrowed as he read it. "Gato, your most recent reports have been received. We are not happy that you were unable to undermine the shinobi villages internally. Nonetheless, your efforts in obtaining the towns required for our future plans serve to offset your error. As soon as possible, make sure Nami no Kuni is entirely under your control. In the future, it will serve as a great operational base. The attached list shows you which towns, once you have completed Nami, you should focus on obtaining within High no Kuni and K's no Kuni. Gato, don't let us down again. Above all, though, don't let your family down. With a blink, Raphael withdrew another document containing a list of towns in High no Kuni and K's no Kuni. After giving it to his clone, who had completed going through the papers detailing Gato's illicit activities, he hastily wrote down the names of the towns. Raphael leafed through the other documents, discovering lists of armament supplies obtained, groups of men enlisted and dispatched to Tetsu no Kuni or other locations within the various nations, and what seemed to be blueprints for transforming Nami into an island stronghold. Moving next to his clone, Raphael divided the last few documents and copied them onto the scroll. After they were done, Raphael threw the clone out and got to work putting things back where they belonged and making sure the office looked the same as it had when he had first arrived. He closed the fake book covering over the safe, secured it, and then watched as one book fell out of a higher shelf and blinked. The book felt much lighter than it should have when he picked it up and began to blink. When he opened it, he discovered that inside was a hollow dot-out section that held a box disguised as a book. He blinked at the amount of dust on it, realizing that it had clearly been neglected for a long time, possibly long before Gato moved into the mansion. He picked it up slowly and wiped away the dust to reveal a few kanji, most of them unreadable. Still, one stood out, the kanji for summoning. Intrigued, Raphael tucked the scroll, along with the scroll containing all the knowledge he had acquired, into his pouches. He moved to the windows and looked out to see if there were any guards. The guard on the side wall would be a problem, but the one on the back wall was still unconscious. He watched the man cautiously walk along his wall until he got to the section where it joined the back wall. Once he was out of sight, Raphael turned and started walking back down the wall. He closed the window behind him and used the small blade to carefully lock the latch once more. He deftly descended the side of the mansion, using handholds to slow his fall, and before long he was crouching and breathing heavily. After making a frantic sprint, he vanished behind the rear wall without being noticed by anyone. Smiling at his accomplishment, Raphael was about to jump off the edge when he heard someone yelling on top of the wall. He looked up, cursing, and felt a tiny bit of relief when he realized that the guard he had knocked out had apparently woken up and was raising the alarm, rather than someone having noticed him. Hearing shouts and running around above, he swiftly slipped over the edge of the cliff and started back down. He was sitting in Muke's boat, smiling as they rowed away, after a brief chakra descent. Muke laughed to see the smile on Raphael's face. "I take it you found out some interesting things?" Raphael remarked. "You could say that," as they rode away from the mansion and into the night. The following day, Tazuna's home the following day, Raphael informed his fellow assassins, Gatos connected to someone or someone's who have designs on the elemental nations. Right now, the four of them were in Tazuna's dining room, examining the information scroll that Raphael had duplicated the previous evening. While Kakashi and his group trained and kept an eye on Tazuna, Ino was outside practicing with her senbon. Raphael pointed to the duplicate map. Apparently, Gato was ordered by someone to not only take control of a number of port towns, but also towns along these routes here. Judging by the other map I saw, he's gained shadow control over a number of the towns, but he's still working on the rest. He was also ordered by this person or group to weaken the shinobi villages, which is why he has been trying to get his men into them. As for Nami, apparently their intent to turn it into some fortified base for whatever this group's plan is. Whoever Gato is working with or for, they have big plans for the elemental nations. After giving the map a thorough examination, Anko used a kunai point to tap Tetsu no Kuni. "What about here? What's the connection?" "I'm having trouble understanding that," Raphael muttered. "They have no shinobi and practically no contact with anyone associated with shinobi. From what I understand, their only contact with anyone outside of Tetsu no Kuni is when dealing with merchants or the occasional need for a neutral meeting ground between leaders and factions. And yet these routes connect Tetsu no Kuni to almost every other country, their capital, and their hidden shinobi village, if they have one." Hinata also gave it a thorough examination. "Well, what could they use these routes for? Trade routes?" she inquired. Anko gave a headshake. "No way. If they were trade routes, they wouldn't connect to the hidden villages. We have our own mercantile guilds who handle village trade. No, this is something else." With the other three turning to face him, Naruto questioned, "Do you think there may be invasion routes? I mean, an invasion army needs things like food, supplies, weapons and stuff, right? What if these routes are that? Supply routes for an invading army?" Raphael took another look at the map. "It's possible, except why would Tetsu no Kuni want to invade any of the elemental nations? They have no quarrel with the shinobi, and even if they did, They could never hope to match the entire elemental nations. Could they? Anko gave a shrug. I doubt they could. Tetsu no Kuni samurai are definitely well above the level of the samurai in the other nations, but almost 80% of their samurai can't wield chakra. They'd never stand a chance against shinobi in open battle. The only reason no shinobi village has ever conquered Tetsu no Kuni is because the weather there is harsh and unpredictable, and they know their land better than anyone in the world. Even their non-chakra using samurai could cut a shinobi force to pieces using the geography and weather to give them the advantage. Outside their land though, I don't know, it's hard seeing this as plans for an invasion. For now, there's nothing else we can do about this, until we learn more. Currently, we need to focus on taking down Gato and protecting Nami. So we'll need to find a time and moment to strike at Gato. We'll continue reconnaissance, and find that moment, Raphael said as he unfolded the scroll. Hinata, Naruto, you two keep training. We need to be as strong as possible for the coming assassination. Raphael sighed and put the scroll away as the two nodded and left. He mutely said to Anko, to be honest, I'm scared by Naruto's suggestion. Jiraiya's spy network has heard of rumblings in Tetsu no Kuni, a movement against chakra wielders. My own spy network has heard of a few people across Hai no Kuni who are talking about the same thing. If Gato is connected to this movement, it could explain a lot of things, he stated. So who is behind this movement exactly? What do they expect to accomplish? Replied Anko. Arms folded, the assassin mentor leaned back a little. That's what we need to find out. If someone's looking to start a war, I want to try and stop them ahead of time. Maybe if we coordinate with Jiraiya, we can find out more. Anko spoke with a dangerous tone, and maybe if we capture Gato, we can persuade him to tell us more. Something to think about, when we know his thugs won't raise the town down, said Raphael. For now, we watch, and we train. Anko nodded and stood up, but Raphael intervened. He pulled out the scroll he had discovered and said, I think it's a summoning contract. I found something else at Gato's mansion. I don't think it belonged to Gato, as it had a lot of dust on it when I found it. Anko accepted it and opened it slowly. The interior appeared immaculate in contrast to the outside. A few previous summoners' signatures and blood stained fingerprints were still visible. Anko quickly skimmed over the summoning contract's title. Fennec foxes, what the heck is a fennec? She inquired. Raphael silently shrugged. Not sure exactly, but apparently, it's something that involves foxes. Any thoughts on what we should do with it? Anko glanced at Raphael as he rolled up the scroll. Well, I don't need it, because I already have a summons, sort of. What about you? Raphael gave a headshake. No, I'm not quite active enough to need one. We could take it back to Konoha, see what Hokage-sama thinks. Or, Anko grinned, we could see if one of my cute lil genin want to sign it. Might be nice to have a summoner on the team. Raphael took a step back and nodded. You understand it better than I do, so feel free, he replied. Anko put the scroll away after nodding. I'll wait till we get back to Konoha. Right now we need to focus more on the mission at hand, she stated. Tsunami appeared downstairs at that precise moment, making the two look up. I'm sorry to bother you, but I was about to go shopping for ingredients for dinner. I don't suppose I could trouble you or your genin for an escort? Anko responded. Happy to help, Anko said. Getting to her feet, she said, so shall we? Raphael sighed and touched the information scroll in his pocket once more as they walked away. A part of him continued to consider what his allies had said, particularly Naruto's concept. The thing that alarmed him was that, among all the concepts he could come up with, that one seemed the most plausible. He sighed and moved outside to train, shaking his head. The business magnate was currently perusing reports in his office at Gato's estate. He heard the guards' cries from outside. He had been discovered intoxicated the previous evening, but he had persisted in saying he had been attacked, even going so far as to sound a false alarm. That man was currently receiving punishment. When the door opened and Haku and Zabuza came inside, Gato looked up. When Gato saw that Zabuza was attempting to conceal a very slight limp, he hardly even grinned. The former Kiri Junin stood in front of Gato and gave a quiet growl. He asked, "What do you want, Gato?" as Haku stayed silent behind her mask. Gato got up and just grinned. "I just thought you'd be interested in hearing the plan I've devised to handle the bridge builder," he replied. "I told you, we'll handle him and his escorts," Zabuza uttered in a hysterical manner while attempting to suppress a tiny twinge of pain. Gato's smile vanished, and he gave a slight scowl of rage. "Unless I'm mistaken, Zabuza, there are 2 of you, and 9 of them. And last time, they would have killed you if not for your assistant. So excuse me if I decide to try and make sure the job gets done properly." Zabuza was about to reply, but Haku gave him a small bump to stop him, forcing him to rein him in. Gato started talking. My plan is simple. I will have several civilians rounded up, and we'll announce that if Tazuna does not surrender himself, they will be hanged. Perhaps even a child or two. If Tazuna surrenders himself, that is that. However, I believe something more plausible will happen. Zabuza said, and what's that? The Konoha shinobi will undoubtedly try to convince him that they can stop the hanging. They'll divide their efforts to rescue the people who are to be hung, and protect the bridge builder, and that is when we'll strike. You and Haku will engage the shinobi guarding the bridge builder, keep them distracted and wear them down, and in the critical moment, my men will rush them, slaughtering them and the bridge builder. I will even finish work on the bridge, in order to bring in new resources to help complete my takeover Nami, he grinned. Zabuza took a moment to examine Gato. What makes you so certain the Konoha shinobi will act the way you're expecting? They could very well ignore the hanging altogether. He smirked and made Zabuza clench his fist, because they know if they do, Tazuna will turn himself in, and their mission will fail. They'll want to complete the mission, and receive their pay. That is how you shinobi operate, isn't it? He said. How long until you're recovered enough to fight the Konoha shinobi? He said, 3 days at the most, and Gato nodded. Then 2 days from now, we'll begin the operation, he stated. You two are dismissed. Gato gestured to a thug, who quickly moved over to him as the two shinobi turned to leave. Zabuza turned to Haku as they left the room and the door shut. He said, wait here and listen. With a nod, Haku moved behind a pedestal holding a vase and performed a genjutsu before disappearing from view. Zabuza, meantime, departed carrying a clone that resembled Haku. Silently, Haku crouched down near the door and listened, staying out of sight while gathering information about Gato. Konoha after coming home from a border patrol with Kusa, Yugito hummed softly as she made her way to her apartment. She had been missing out on 2 things while she was away, so she was looking forward to a good meal and a long bath. But as she got closer to her door, she paused, her eyes widening, and then she gave a small smile. Her apartment's door had a bag with a happy cat face stuck to it. She took the bag and opened it with a rueful shake of her head, laughing when she saw the cute plush kitten inside. Given her position as the Nibi Jinchuriki, one might argue that this was insensitive, but Yugito truly loved cats, a fact she had only revealed to Anko, Kaseki, and Iruka. As she took the plush toy out, she blinked to see a note tied to a ribbon around its neck. She took it out and started reading. Iruka Amino kindly extends an invitation to you to supper on Saturday night at 7 o'clock. It's formal attire. If you agree, just wave at this point. Yugito grinned, turned, and waved before entering. As she was leaving, she noticed a swiftly moving figure leaping out of the building across from hers. She closed the door, sighed contentedly, and held the stuffed animal close to her body. You've got a good catch there, little kitten, Matabi mused to herself, content with her holding. Yugito merely nodded, then let out a squeal and hurried to her room, carrying her new plush toy. Yakumo was resting from a workout and watching Lee work out somewhere else, blushing a little. He was working out bare chest because he had actually pulled down the top of his suit due to the heat. Yakumo could only blush at his body and the perspiration that was dripping off of him. Before she could finish looking away, Lee stood up, walked over, and grabbed a towel. Struggling to push the mental image from her thoughts, she looked at his supply belt, which was now angled to one side. So I noticed you have a pair of tonfa. Do you know how to use them? She inquired. At that, Lee grinned. Guy. Sensei thought they would be appropriate with my fighting style, since I am unable to use nin or genjutsu. He wanted to give me as much of an advantage in my taijutsu as possible, he stated. I am still learning though, and would not say I am proficient in them. Yet, he stated. Yakumo gave a quiet nod. Kurenai. Sensei, she said something similar to me recently. That perhaps I should add something to my arsenal, to supplement my genjutsu. I'm not sure what type of weapon works though. Do you have any thoughts? She inquired. A fascinating inquiry, Lee remarked, encircling his neck with the towel. I would assume something that was light and quick, perhaps easy to use as well. Allow me to speak with Guy. Sensei, perhaps he might have some thoughts on it, he inquired. With a smile, Yakumo nodded in agreement. She said, thank you, and then stood up. So when we're done, would you like to go get lunch with me? She said. He gave her a thumbs up and smiled. With a, I'd love to, he replied. Gee. Great, she uttered as she took her position. Shall we? Before long, Yakumo was fighting Lee once more while making a concerted effort to keep her eyes off his chest. That evening, Tazuna's residence in silence, The two groups took turns spreading out across the dining room table, making sure everyone had a place to sit. Tsunami had made her way back with the meager groceries she managed to salvage, and Anko, Kakashi, Raphael, and their genin teams had added some of their own supplies and some fish they had caught. When he finished his meal and took a sip of sake from a saucer, Tazuna grinned. His statement, "The bridge work is going well, I'd say 2 weeks at most, and it'll be finished. And Gato's reign will be over. Then we'll need to be extra careful. Gato won't just let you ruin his grip on Nami. He'll undoubtedly strike, and soon," said Kakashi. "And Zabuza will be looking for vengeance. Fortunately we have a numbers advantage, so we should be able to handle him and his helper, if she's his only help left in Nami," Anko stated. "With any luck, we'll be able to take down Gato, and soon." Inari slammed his hands on the table at that precise moment. "You all should just shut up. Pretending like you're going to win. You can't. Gato's just going to kill you all, so stop pretending you're big shot heroes," he screamed at them. The shinobi all cast a sidelong glance at Inari, their emotions ranging from surprise and sadness to, in a few cases, annoyance or anger. Thanks to Tsunami's explanation when Sakura inquired about a picture that was hanging in the hallway and had a clearly torn dot-out portion of an unidentified man's face in it, they were aware of the cause of Inari's rage. The man who is missing from the photo is Kaiza, a local fisherman who risked his life to close a floodgate during a storm to keep the town from flooding after saving Inari from drowning. Before Gato arrived, he had treated Inari like a son. After resisting Gato and his thugs, Kaiza was beaten, publicly disfigured, and killed in front of everyone. Seeing Kaiza die had left Inari traumatized. Kiba responded now, feeling conceited and irritated. He grinned and said, "Yeah right kid. Gato's nothing but some greedy midget. He's got nothing on us." As soon as Inari angrily exclaimed, "Shut up! You all have no idea what it's like to live here. What it's like to be living in pain and suffering. You all live happy lives but you don't know anything." A kunai yanked off his head and buried it in the wall behind him. With his hand still extended and a look of anger on his face, Naruto sat there. Slowly getting to his feet, he said, "Will you listen to yourself, bitch? You sit there, acting like your pain, your problems are the only ones in the world, that what you've gone through is the worst in the world. Believe me kid, the things I've seen, the people I've run into, there are more than enough people out there who would happily trade lives with you. So shut your mouth and stop disrespecting your grandfather and Kaiza," he yelled angrily before grabbing his kunai, and fled the room. Tsunami turned to face the three adults, while Tazuna just cast a downward glance. Quietly, "Is he okay?" she questioned. Anko simply nodded slightly. With a trembling gaze, she addressed Inari, saying, "He is. Though he's not wrong. Naruto has been an orphan from the day he was born. What's worse is the majority of people in our village hate him. Most would be happy to see him gone or dead, if not do the deed themselves. He didn't have anyone in his life until he was 6 years old," she continued. "Hinata here. Her own clan and father basically made her believe she was the most worthless thing alive, and threw her out on the streets. Myself, the man I trusted and adored like a father, betrayed me and left me for dead with a symbol of his cruelty and betrayal, marking me forever," she said, unconsciously returning to the left side of her body. "Inari, your pain and loss are bad, but Naruto is right. There are others who have lost and suffered worse than what you have. You still have your mother and grandfather, who are doing everything they can to give you a good life. You shouldn't dishonor them, or Kaiza," she said, as she set down her largely empty dishes. She whispered, "Hinata, take first watch. I'm heading out to my tent." Hinata gave a nod, imitating Anko. Raphael and the family remained behind as the shinobi, one by one, made their way to their respective tents or rooms. Tazuna just sighed and put a gentle hand on his grandson's shoulder as Tsunami resumed his quiet dishwashing. It was at this point that Raphael spoke up. "Inari, I am sorry if Naruto frightened you," he replied. "He has had a hard life, one that I tried to make easier, and may have made all that much harder in the process. But he and Anko are not wrong. However, do not take fear or anger from what they've said. Instead, learn from it. They have suffered so far, but they have found new life and happiness." Looking up at Raphael, Inari shuddered a little as he spoke on. Kaiza, he was, and should still be considered a hero. Because he was willing to lay down his life for those he considered most precious in his life. Do not dishonor his memory, Inari, but instead honor it, and embrace who he was. Strength comes not from numbers of men, or money, but from having something or someone that is worth fighting, and even dying for. Your grandfather fights for the freedom and future of this village. Your mother fights to give you a better life. What will you fight for, Inari? Raphael stood up slowly and gave Tsunami a bow. He left behind a perplexed and thoughtful young boy after saying, "Forgive Naruto for his actions, and thank you for dinner." Zabuza sighed elsewhere, peering out his room's window. In a low voice, he said, "If what you heard was true, Haku, then we have only one choice." Haku said, "It is true, Zabuza." Sama, as he stood close to his bed. With a simple sigh, the former Kiri Junin turned to face her. He said, "You know what to do then, Haku," and the girl nodded before disappearing in a shunshin. A motionless figure was observed resting against a tree, seemingly dozing off, as dawn broke over the Nami region. He had stormed out the night before, furious over what Inari had said. He had stormed around for a while before finding the closest clearing, where he promptly started training and taking his anger out on some unlucky shadow clones. He had simply set up some countermeasures to ward off any potential enemies or threats, and settled down in the clearing for the night, even after he had eventually tired himself out and was too angry to go back. The figure that was getting closer to Naruto's sleeping form didn't appear to be stopped by the aforementioned countermeasures. The figure came to a halt and positioned itself above Naruto, gazing down at him. They reached down slowly, but stopped when the tip of a hidden blade came dangerously close to their throat. With his eyes still closed, Naruto uttered, "If I were you, I wouldn't come any closer." Haku slowly withdrew as she realized how dangerous the situation was. "I'm not here to fight you," she declared, concealing her nervous expression from Naruto's quick reaction to her arrival behind her mask. With his eyes open, he said, "Please forgive me if I don't believe you," and he slowly stood up, his body tense and prepared for battle. He looked at the figure in front of him, then resumed his speech. He questioned, keeping an eye out for any movement from her, "Why are you here exactly?" Haku simply raised her hands slowly to indicate that she would not be picking up a weapon or initiating a jutsu. "I'm here at the behest of Zabuza Sama. He wishes to discuss a cease fire, and perhaps even a temporary alliance," she continued. After blinking in shock, Naruto narrowed his eyes. Still tense and prepared to act if necessary, he asked her, "Why would he do that? And why should I believe a word you're saying?" "Zabuza Sama is willing to come to a location of your sensei's choosing, and is willing to do so unarmed. There he will discuss things with them, if they are willing," Haku stated. "We have information on Gato's plans that we're willing to offer in exchange for this truce." Naruto began. Huh. Why would Zabuza be willing to betray his client? Granted, he was willing to betray his village, but Haku interrupted, sounding increasingly irate. She bit her lip and took a few deep breaths before exclaiming, "Do not speak of Zabuza Sama like that. The village betrayed him. We have learned recently that Gato intends to betray us as well to avoid having to pay for our services. Zabuza wishes to take the best course of action in order to survive. Please, at least tell your sensei this," she said with a more reserved voice. After observing her, Naruto created a shadow clone and hastened back to Tazuna's residence. He stated plainly, "We'll have an answer soon enough," while continuing to observe her. Haku nodded and then stole a quiet glance around the clearing. Her gaze narrowed slightly upon seeing the stab points and slashes adorning a few of the nearby trees. She said, "I take it you were training?" All Naruto did was stand there, poised to quickly duck or reach for his weapons. He asked bluntly, "What if I was not exactly in the mood to talk to an enemy shinobi who might be setting up a trap?" Haku saw him tense and on the verge of reaching for one of the weapons at his back before carefully taking off her mask and putting it at her side. She murmured, "Please, I did not come here as an enemy." She was pretty attractive, Naruto had to concede. Pale skin, soft brown eyes, and delicate features. Though he mentally started, he thought, but she can't beat out Hinata. Chan. Why did that occur to him? Yes, Hinata was adorable, really adorable, but he hadn't given her much thought before. However, Anko practically teleported in front of him from the tops of the trees and landed next to him, cutting short his reflections. She got up and studied Naruto and the kunoichi in front of her. "So you're Zabuza's assistant?" she inquired. "Yes. As I told your student, I'm here with an offer from Zabuza for a truce," Haku replied. Anko shifted her weight back onto one leg and crossed her arms. "Huh. So Zabuza Momochi desires a ceasefire?" she inquired. "Why exactly? I want a straight answer." Haku sighed, a little frustrated. "We have learned that Gato intends to betray us. We could simply leave, but Zabuza Sama stated that it would look bad to future prospective clients. Instead, he proposes we work alongside you to take down Gato. We survive Gato's trap, you protect your client, and hopefully we can all leave this island alive," Haku stated simply. Anko gave her a quick glance before nodding. All right. Tell him to meet us here at this clearing this afternoon at 2. He's to come unarmed, she said with a smile. He can accept it or leave it. After hesitating, Haku nodded. She said, very well, and then she was gone in a shunshin. With a sigh, Naruto was struck on the head by Anko. He exclaimed, ow. What the heck, sensei? Hinata sat down beside them, folding her bow and putting it in its back harness. That was for staying out here all night long. We've been worried sick, said the woman. Naruto thought, cute, again, but he quickly squashed the thought as he rubbed his head. The girl with indigo hair had a pout mixed with a disapproving face. He said in a low voice, all right, I'm sorry. Just needed to get away from that brat, before becoming serious. What do you think Gato is planning? Anko stated, probably nothing good, if his track record is anything to go by, as he peered out into the forest. As the three of them headed back to Tazuna's house, she remarked, but if he's willing to turn on Zabuza, he either is incredibly dumb, or thinks he has an ace up his sleeve. Guess we'll find out, won't we? They saw Sakura and Sasuke actually sparring as they got closer. Sakura was obviously far weaker than Sasuke, but the pink-haired girl refused to give up and kept fighting. Naruto observed with a half-smile on his face. Well, at least she's got one person at that team to help her, he replied. He was aware of Sakura Ino's fierce protectiveness toward her and the blonde's frequent outbursts about how nobody on Team 7 seemed to even try to assist Sakura with her training. Sasuke's dislike of Ino dates back to their academy days, when the sore Sasuke intentionally bumped into Ino and knocked her over after losing to Naruto, Hinata, and Ino in a training exercise. She's probably not happy at Sasuke though. She doesn't like him that much, Hinata remarked. Even though other girls gushed over Sasuke, Ino had grown to detest him even though she hadn't been seriously hurt. As Kakashi drew near, Anko sighed slightly in irritation. What was that all about? He asked, practically pressuring her to tell him why she had left. Despite her desire to keep the information from him, Anko spoke despite narrowing her eyes. Zabuza's minion met with Naruto here, asking to meet with one of us. They stated that Zabuza wishes to call a truce. Apparently Gato plans to betray him, so he wants to work with us to defeat Gato, in exchange for him being allowed to leave afterwards. Kakashi simply crossed his arms while idly glancing at her. And what do you intend to do? I intend for you, me, and Raphael to talk to him, she replied. She went on when she noticed him raise an eyebrow. If his offer is genuine, it's the best chance we have of completing your mission to protect Tazuna, and our mission of assassinating Gato. If it's not, we can take him out. Kakashi asked, and how do you know Zabuza isn't setting a trap? The three of us arrive, and get killed, paving the way for Zabuza to massacre our genin and the client. Anko grinned. Which is why Naruto and Hinata will be there, hidden, ready to provide us support. The two of them are pretty good with their bow and crossbow, and they've been training for years in mastering stealth. Before speaking, Kakashi gave the two genin a quick glance. He began, are you sure they can handle it? Sasuke is, but Anko interrupted. Naruto and Hinata are skilled at not only stealth, but ranged combat, especially Hinata. She can nail a target at 100 yards before you can blink. And Naruto is fairly handy with his crossbow. They'll be all we need, especially since we don't want to put our genin into close quarters combat with Zabuza, she continued. Not to mention Hinata's Byakugan will be a lot more useful than Sasuke. Kakashi shrugged after his one visible eye slightly narrowed. With a glance at the area where Sasuke and Sakura were practicing, he said, makes sense, I guess. I'll leave him here in charge then. Anko just let out a small sigh. She muttered, he really doesn't like having his authority questioned. Arrogant prick, and then turned to face her two pupils. You two make sure you're ready when the time comes. We'll need you in good hiding spots. Yes, sensei, they exclaimed as they accompanied her inside to speak with Raphael. Hokage's office, Konoha after reading a message from Kumo, Sarutobi sighed. The Chunin exams, which this year would take place in Konoha, were drawing near. If Kumo hadn't wanted to send a few teams to participate in the exams, this wouldn't be anything particularly noteworthy. Kumo had not sent a single genin team to the Chunin exams, held in Konoha, since the Hyuga incident a few years prior. Mostly because they probably thought the Hyuga would attack them again. They were sending teams to this one now, though. What had changed their minds after all this time? Was Yugito involved? Maybe they believed that this was their opportunity to attack her. Alternatively, perhaps try the Hyuga again. Or maybe they just wanted to be done with this whole thing. Sarutobi knew he had to remain vigilant at all times. He gestured for one of his Anbu guards to appear, and as one did, he wrote out a message. He gave the message he had written to that shinobi. "Take this to Anbu headquarters, and deliver it to the Anbu commander," he simply instructed. The shinobi of the elite class nodded and disappeared, leaving Sarutobi to mull over in private all the ways he could secure the village without closing it off to customers or incoming rivals. Though he knew he could ask the assassin when he got back, he secretly wished Raphael was here to try and get his take on things. He would move forward for the time being and hope that everything went as planned. Salutations to you. Kuni standing in the clearing, Anko, Kakashi, and Raphael anticipated Zabuza's arrival. While they scanned the woods, all three of them had their hands close to their weapons despite their best efforts to appear composed. They knew Naruto and Hinata were weighing a short distance away, prepared to help them with long-range fire if necessary. The three of them stiffened slightly at the sight of Zabuza, who had returned without his sword and was now decked out in a dark blue sleeveless top and matching pants. He walked over to them and stopped with his arms folded about 20 feet away. After glancing at them, he surveyed the surrounding forest. "So, here we are," he eventually uttered. Zabuza shook his head when Kakashi asked, "What information do you have, Zabuza?" When Zabuza said, "Not going to work that way, monkey," he was making fun of the monkey. Kakashi balled his fist as Zabuza went on. "You agree that you let me and Haku go after all this is done, and then I tell you what I know. That's simple," he declared. "Do we have a deal?" Kakashi glanced at Raphael and Anko, who both gave a simple nod. Kakashi inhaled deeply before responding. "Very well. You and your ally will be allowed to leave this island once Gato is dealt with." Huh. "I need something more binding than that," Zabuza replied. "What's to stop you from betraying me after all is said and done?" Just as Kakashi was going to respond, Raphael moved to the front. "I give you my word as a fellow swordsman. I swear upon my blade, and my honor that you and your companion will be allowed to leave, if you so choose," he said simply. Zabuza studied him, examining him closely. Finally, he said, "As a fellow swordsman, I accept your oath." Zabuza smirked at Kakashi and Anko's perplexed expression. He mockingly remarked, "Typical Konoha shinobi, unable to understand the intricacies of being a true swordsman." With a raised hand, Raphael prevented his friends from acting rashly. He said, "Please do not let his words ruffle you," and Anko calmed down a little. Zabuza, in the meantime, began to talk. "Gato intends to use a trap to split your force in half. He intends to take a number of villagers prisoner, and execute them via public hanging 2 days from now. His intent is to demand that Tazuna surrender himself, in exchange for the prisoners' lives. He's betting though that instead of allowing Tazuna to turn himself over, you'll convince him to continue working on the bridge, while you split your force in two and rescue the prisoners. His intent is to have Haku and I attack Tazuna at the bridge and slay him, with his mercenary forces providing us with additional support. That was the plan he told us. However, I had Haku eavesdrop on him, and she learned that he intends to betray us as well. His thugs will hold back until we are all weakened, then move in and wipe us all out," stated that. With concern on her face, Anko cast a quick glance at Raphael and Kakashi. She whispered, "Gotta admit, the bastard is clever. There was no issue with the thugs. An army of thugs could be subdued by seasoned Junin, if they were relatively young. A worn-out and fatigued Junin was an entirely different story. But the public executions and hostage situations were the true issue. The people of Nami would turn against Tazuna if those weren't stopped, especially considering how defeated they currently felt. If Tazuna didn't turn himself in, or if the Konoha shinobi didn't attempt to save them, they very well might turn and support Gato. Furthermore, the whole Nami populace was too strong for the Konoha shinobi to handle." But Raphael appeared contemplative. "Do you know where the execution will be held? And how many of Gato's men will be there?" he inquired. Zabuza gave a nod. "Yeah. He plans to hold it in the middle of the town, opposite the old town hall. I'd say there won't be more than 10 or 15 men in total guarding it. He will however have 50 or 60 men with him at the bridge." With a contemplative nod, the assassin began formulating a plan in his mind. Looking at him, Kakashi decided to swallow his pride if it meant surviving, even though it bothered him that he didn't feel in control. "I take it you have a plan forming." "I have the beginning of a plan, yes, Zabuza. Return to your hideout. On the day of the ambush, come to the bridge, but use your mist to hide us all from Gato's view. We'll make it seem like we're fighting, and when the time comes, we'll turn the trap on him. I'll need to speak to some allies of ours, make sure they're in position," Raphael continued. "And, we'll need to handle the executions as well. And I think I know who can handle it." Zabuza merely grinned behind his disguise. "Hey, well here's hoping you know what the hell you're doing," he replied. He cried out, because if you don't, I swear I'll make your life miserable in hell when we're all dead. Haku. His partner landed beside him, his sword fastened to her back. He took the handle and easily lifted it, securing it to his own back while she undid the straps. He spoke loud enough for them to hear. Haku, I want you to stay in the area, to act as the go-between in case they need to relay any information to me. Be discreet, he said. Zabuza turned to go, but stopped as Haku nodded. He remarked, oh, and tell your little brats that they're not bad at hiding, but they've still got a ways to go before they're hidden from me, and then he vanished into a splash of water. Haku, on the other hand, just gave the Konoha shinobi and assassin a bow of her masked head before vanishing into the woods. After exchanging a quick glance, the two Junin and one assassin pointed to Naruto and Hinata. Raphael turned to them as the two soon joined them, stowing their weapons. Good work you two. Alright, I need to get in contact with Muki and his crew, see if we can't get them into position for the ambush, he stated. Kakashi questioned, what about the prisoners and the hanging? We'll need to stop that from happening without dividing ourselves too much. You said you had someone who could handle that? Yes, I do, replied Raphael. But first we should return to Tazuna's house and gather the rest of our genin. Afterwards, I'll go contact Muki. A half hour later, Anko and Kakashi were standing behind the two teams of genin as they sat on the dock beside Tazuna's house. Now that his plan was complete, Raphael stood in front of them, prepared to give them a briefing. We've learned that Gato intends to try and divide our forces, before moving in to wipe out Tazuna and any of us who are protecting him, Raphael said. He intends to do this by taking a number of citizens of the town prisoner, and will threaten to hang them if Tazuna does not turn himself in. However, Gato is also banking on the fact that we will convince Tazuna not to turn himself in, and will instead divide our forces to rescue the prisoners as well as protect him at the bridge. He intends to attack us at the bridge with the majority of his thugs, as well as Zabuza and his companion, Raphael continued. Sakura lifted a hand in silence. Why don't you simply sneak into his home and kill him then? That's why you're here, isn't it? Sakura inquired. At her inquiry, Raphael gave a nod. Under normal circumstances I would, except for one problem. What about his thugs? If we remove Gato, the thugs will no longer be under his control, and they'll simply rampage through the town. Countless innocents will suffer or die. However, if we can ensure his thugs are away from the town, we can take both him and his men out in a single battle. Especially due to some allies who have joined us, and will be aiding us at the bridge. Well, what about Zabuza? It's not like he'll just let us wipe out Gato, Kiba replied. The majority of the genin turned to look at Anko when she said, actually, he's helping us. Zabuza learned that Gato intends to betray him and kill him on the bridge, after having Zabuza tire us out. He's the one who approached us with this information, and we're intending to work together to defeat him. What about the execution then? How will we handle that? Asked Sasuke. Raphael grinned. This is where Gato has underestimated us. He doesn't know what we have at our disposal. We'll only need one person to handle the execution, and that one person is Naruto. Hearing his name caused Naruto's eyes to enlarge. Me? He exclaimed, startled. Kiba exclaimed, no way, I'm much better than that loser. Send me, but faltered slightly in response to Hinata's glare. Kiba growled a little angrily at her words. I defeated you in a matter of seconds, dog boy, and Naruto is stronger than me. What does that say? Raphael simply shook his head and sighed. Naruto's eyes widened in understanding as Raphael asked, Naruto has a jutsu that is perfect for dealing with multiple attackers, especially when combined with his training. Isn't that right, Naruto? The assassin with blonde hair gave a nod. Yes, I understand, he replied. Do we know how many thugs will be at the execution area, and where it is? It was now that Anko spoke. There will be between 10 to 20 thugs, and it's going to be held in the town square, opposite the old town hall. It was Kakashi who made the decision to speak now. He began, maybe we should give him some backup. One of us could. But Anko interrupted. Kakashi, you know full well you, me, and Raphael will need to be on that bridge to handle Gato's thugs as well as Zabuza if he's playing us. That leaves only the genin, and out of them all, who can we honestly spare? Kiba is too brash for something that requires timing and subtlety, and Sasuke, Hinata, and Ino are too valuable to send with him. We need them on the bridge. Sakura is the only one we could maybe spare, and even then I'm sure you'd rather have her on the bridge against the 60 thugs we'll be facing. Trust me, Naruto can handle this, she said. Shrugging, Kakashi bit back a retort. Very well then, however, there's something your plan hasn't covered, Kakashi responded. What if the people rise up against Tazuna after Gato takes some of them prisoner and demands Tazuna's surrender? We can't fight them, can we? Raphael shook his head slowly. No, we can't, but we can at least talk to them, and try to get them to see reason, he replied. He inquired, are there any other questions? He nodded satisfiedly as they all shook their heads or said nothing. All right then, I suggest you all get to training or watching Tazuna. Naruto, be sure to set aside some time to scout out the town center, said the man. Naruto gave a nod, and then everyone was let go. With a resolve to be prepared for what lay ahead, they all set out. Nami forests. The following day in a clearing, Naruto and Hinata were hard at work honing their individual ranged weapons on a transportable target that Naruto had sealed inside a storage scroll. In fact, it had become a competition between them, to see how many times they could each hit the bullseye consecutively. When Hinata let go of another arrow and struck the center of the target once more, she let out a grunt. While Naruto merely grinned, she said, "That's 6 for me," and pulled out her arrow. He said, "6 is not bad," and got his crossbow ready. He was about to fire, saying, "But come on, 6 in a row is a warm-up for me," when he felt something tickle his ear. Unfortunately, his surprise caused him to jerk, and the shot missed its target and struck outside its inner area. He spun around to face Hinata, who was standing there naively, attempting to conceal the leaf that had amused him. He declared, "You cheated." "I did not," she exclaimed, seeming astonished. "I would never cheat." She giggled and hopped up into a tree as Naruto growled and lunged at her to try and get the leaf. She continued to smile down at Naruto as he stood on the ground, mockingly angry. But Haku's entrance into the clearing cut short their conversation. The slightly older girl, who had been wearing her mask the entire time, was being watched warily by the two of them as Hinata hopped down. She did nothing more than point to the target they had been aiming at. "Do you mind if I join you? Zabuza. Sama would surely wish for me to get some training in while I'm here," she replied quietly. Naruto glanced at Hinata, who shrugged cautiously. "Sure," Naruto replied. Haku gave them a nod, then took out a handful of senbon needles and threw them at the target with a smooth, practiced motion. Naruto flinched upon seeing Haku's close knit cluster of needles, all jutting outward in the center of the target. The two of them watched in awkward silence as Haku continued to toss senbon at the target and retrieve them, unsure of what to do. After a while she stopped and turned away from them. She apologized for the interruption and said, "I will leave as I am obviously creating tension." She then went to get her senbon. In an attempt to be courteous, Naruto said, "No, you don't have to. It's just, we're not sure what to do really, you know." Haku said, "Indeed? I am sorry to cause such confusion," taking out her senbon. In an attempt to reduce tension, Hinata posed a question to Haku. "So what made you want to work with Zabuza-san?" she inquired. After a few moments of silence, Haku answered and turned back to Hinata. "Zabuza. Sama saved me. I owe him my life. To serve him however he requires me to serve," she stated simply. "He is my precious person, and I will fight and die for him." As she spoke those words, the two Konoha genin could hear the devotion in her voice. They both understood what she was saying and experiencing. They shared the same sentiments about Anko, Raphael, and other people in addition to one another. They had saved them in different ways, though maybe not in the same way as Zabuza had saved Haku. Haku turned to face them and asked, "Do either of you have a precious person?" They exchanged glances before nodding. Softly, Hinata remarked, "We do, Haku. We have people who are precious to us." Haku gave them both a quick glance before nodding. She uttered, "Good. Then you know what true strength is. Remember this, when the time comes to face off against Gato," and threw her senbon at the target once more. The two genin gave each other a nod before slowly approaching Haku. Even though they weren't friends, they were allies for the time being, working toward the same goal. That evening without any prior notice, Gato took action. His thugs struck throughout the village, gathering up many residents and hauling them into the town center. The family of those taken wept silently, thinking they would see their loved one killed, while the people who were not taken followed, wondering what new hell awaited them. The prisoners were being herded into a cage that was next to the beginnings of a gallows when Gato and most of his goons stood in the middle of the town. With a sly smile, he observed the people assembling gradually and gazing in terror at his goons and the gallows frame that was being assembled. He positioned them just right. One of his lieutenants stepped forward and he nodded to him. With a loud, "All right. Listen up," he caught everyone's attention. "These people are to be executed as an example of what happens when you stand against Gato. He came here to help this village, and instead members of it conspire against him. So to show you all what happens, these people will be hung by the neck until dead on the morning of the second day from now. Gato raised a hand in response to the crowd's weak protest cries and gasps of fear. Perched on a tiny dais, he spoke now. He smirked and said, "But I am not without mercy," grabbing their attention. "If you wish to save your loved ones, then I require one simple thing. The surrender of Tazuna the bridge builder. If he surrenders himself to me before the execution, these people will be spared. Otherwise, say goodbye to your loved ones," he declared. He stamped his cane on the dais and turned to go, with most of his thugs trailing behind. The others remained to construct the gallows and watch over the cell. In the meantime, the people started conversing among themselves, some of them in a very irate manner. "This is all Tazuna's fault. If he had just accepted Gato was in charge, none of this would have happened," someone yelled. "And now our families are going to die because of him, just like Kaiza," a woman yelled. A pitchfork that was resting against a nearby wall was picked up by another man. "Well, I say we make sure he does the right thing. Who's with me?" he yelled. With a few more shouts of agreement and the grab of torches or other weapons, the group swiftly moved in Tazuna's direction. Right now, Naruto and Kiba were on sentry duty at the bridge builder's house. While Naruto was perched on the roof, where he could easily use his crossbow and use his eyes, Kiba was patrolling the ground and using his sense of smell to look for any intruders. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he noticed the increased light coming from the town center. He leaned over the side as soon as he noticed several lights leaving the village and obviously going in this direction. Hoping down, he said, "Kiba-san, we've got incoming trouble. Can you get Kakashi-sensei?" and made his way to the tents where Anko and Raphael were expected to be. The two Junin, one assassin, and their genin team formed up in front of Tazuna's house in a matter of minutes. And as they got closer, they could clearly hear the sounds of an enraged mob in the distance. Looking around, Anko noticed that most of the genin were tense. "Listen up. I don't want any of you jumping the gun, understood? Do not attack them unless we give the order." Before long, they could see torches shining through the trees, and the civilian mob materialized, coming directly toward them. When they noticed the shinobi positioned between them and their goal, they did slow down. They nevertheless persisted in their progress because of their fear and rage. Kakashi moved forward as they got closer, attempting to project a casual yet amiable vibe. With his hands in his pockets, he said, "Good evening to you. Can we help you?" Although he appeared to be in a relaxed pose, the civilians were unaware that he was holding a kunai in his pocket, prepared to deflect any blow that came his way. Once more, the villagers stumbled, but one of them stood up, holding a piece of wood he had fashioned into a club. "We're here for Tazuna, Shinobi-san. Hand him over and we won't have any problems." Kakashi has just lifted his single discernible brow. "Oh? Well, I'm afraid Tazuna is asleep at the moment. Perhaps you could leave a message?" he inquired. The front door opened at that precise moment, and Tazuna cautiously emerged to survey the crowd and circumstances. He asked, "What's going on here?" One of the villagers pointed angrily at him right away. The villager yelled, "You? This is your fault. You just had to provoke Gato, didn't you?" to a chorus of agreement. "Gato's taken some of the others hostage, and threatens to execute them if you don't turn yourself in. We're here to make sure you do," another person yelled. Their yelling and shouting surprised Tazuna, who was about to reply when Anko suddenly stepped forward. "I'm afraid we can't let you do that," she responded. With a gesture toward Tazuna, one woman exclaimed, "This isn't your business, Shinobi. This is between us and that old man. Stop hiding behind these hired goons." When Tazuna emerged from the porch, he snarled, "Don't you people get it? I'm trying to free us from Gato's tyranny. How can you all just live under his thumb like this? Don't you have any pride in yourselves? Look at what pride got us. Kaiza is dead, Tazuna, and now more people are going to die because of your pride. How many more people need to die before you stop trying to fight the impossible?" the group's apparent leader said. Raphael moved forward and a calm voice asked, "Is it impossible? Is it impossible to face Gato?" Another man cried out from the throng, "He already killed our village's hero. Kaiza was the strongest and most noble of us, and Gato easily defeated him and executed him. How can we fight him?" After saying, "By standing together against him," Raphael paused the group. "When Gato first came, and Kaiza stood against him, how many of you supported him? How many of you went with him, to fight and stand against Gato? None of you, right?" he responded. Raphael went on when no one answered. "What would have happened, if you had stood up to Gato as one whole village? Instead of relying on one man to save you, you had relied on yourselves, to protect you and your village. Would you be here right now? Would Gato still be here?" Anko pointed to Tazuna and said, "Tazuna here is putting his life on the line to help this village. Like Kaiza, He's willing to protect this village, even as it abandons him to save itself. Is that how you really want to live? Head down, bowing and scraping to get by. Is that who you people really want to be? Now, with their weapons lowered, the crowd appeared ashamed and guilty. Still, a few appeared committed to bringing Tazuna in. Should we sacrifice our friends and family for Tazuna? Why is he more important than them? Exclaimed the earlier woman, drawing a few, yes, responses from the group. He's not, Kakashi remarked bluntly, but he's your best chance for survival. They're right, though, Tazuna remarked, turning to face the trio of shinobi leaders. After discussing their findings with him earlier, they realized he needed to assist in selling a portion of the plan. Those people out there are going to suffer because of me. Isn't there anything you can do to help them? He inquired. Anko played along, nodding. We'll do what we can to save those people. Perhaps if Gato is attending, we can even try to go after him, she continued. But we'll focus on rescuing those people and protecting Tazuna. At this, the crowd's ire appeared to subside, though the majority of them remained skeptical. However, they were aware that if these shinobi refused to give Tazuna over, there wouldn't be much they could do to actually reach him. Many of them were also somewhat ashamed of the remarks that had been made to them. They started to slowly scatter now, most of them starting to go while a few lingered to give Tazuna stern looks before heading out as well. From his bedroom window, Inari was observing from above, taking in everything that was said, particularly the words spoken by the shinobi. He bit his lip and turned to face his closet as he slowly stepped away from the window. He opened it slowly and reached deep behind everything else in the closet to retrieve a box. He opened it slowly to reveal a small quiver of bolts and a crude crossbow. He picked it up gently and held the last gift Kaiza had ever given him, tears welling up in his eyes. His eyes hardened slowly, and he also gripped the quiver, his expression resolute as he started to test the crossbow to make sure it was working. The morning of the execution with the sun rising and the sky blue and the birds chirping, it was a glorious morning. It would have been amazing to anyone else. But the beauty was lost on the group making their way towards the bridge. Gato was going to set his trap today, and they were going to try to avoid getting caught in it. Everything was prepared because they had worked with Zabuza to iron out the last few details. To provide moral support to those whose loved ones were now imprisoned, Tazuna had ordered a portion of his work crew to remain in town. He gave the others orders to leave town as though they were going to work on the bridge, but to hide until they reached a certain location, where a large group of Naruto shadow clones took their place. After reaching the bridge, these clones would start working, while they waited for Zabuza and Haku to show up with Gato and his men. Before daybreak, Naruto had already departed to sneak into the town square and prepare everything he would need. That meant Raphael and the other genin, along with their Junin sensei, had to watch over Tazuna. The only genin who appeared composed was Hinata, the rest of them were all tense. As far as her assassination missions were concerned, Hinata was the only one who had truly faced life or death situations. She was still nervous despite her experience, even though Anko had always reassured her that this was normal. She smiled serenely at Ino as she saw her fidgeting nervously with her kusarigama. Calming her teammate, "Don't worry, Ino. We'll be fine," she said. With an attempt at a confident smile, Ino nodded and turned to face Sakura. "Hey, stay close to me, please?" she inquired to her companion. Sakura was unable to smile or say anything, so she just nodded. They could see the fog forming as they got closer to the bridge, which indicated that Zabuza and Haku were prepared. Gato and his goons were probably not far behind, waiting for the perfect opportunity to set up their trap. Anko inhaled deeply and turned to face Raphael. She said, holding her twin Ulax, "Here we go." When they saw the finished gallows, the people in town had gathered in the village square and were filled with fear, anxiety, rage, and sorrow. 10 armed thugs were clearly visible around the square, intimidating the people, while 2 more thugs and one of the lieutenants stood at the gallows. They did not appear to notice the hooded figure hunched in the shadows of the bell tower atop the town hall, nor the hay cart that had been rolled to one side of the building. Now that the moment had arrived, the lieutenant moved forward. "Let it be known on this day that these people are hereby sentenced to death by hanging, for compliance in aiding the bridge builder Tazuna," he yelled. "Bring forth the first group." The 2 thugs descended to the prison cell, unlocked it, and hauled out 5 inmates, who were now sobbing and begging for help, any help at all. A few individuals in the throng stiffened, seemingly ready to advance, but fled in fear upon seeing the firearms. Others chose to ignore the people who were being led to the gallows. The hooded figure rose, looking around, nodding as the first victim's head was put under the first noose. He turned and leapt over the bell tower's edge, landing in the hay cart after a somersault. With ease, the figure dressed in black and dark orange started to exit the alleyway and enter the square. A hand covered his mouth, and a thug standing in front of the alleyway never knew what killed him, other than a sharp pain in his back through his heart. The figure stepped over them and pulled the blade back into the bracer on his left arm as he fell to the ground, dead. Now, with a noose around their necks, all the prisoners were made to stand on blocks that would be removed from beneath them when the time came. Just as the lieutenant was about to give the order to kick the blocks away, he noticed a sudden movement in the crowd. He glanced back and then again, blinking, his eyes expanding to see the hooded figure moving quickly through the crowd, one gloved hand returning to the crossbow resting on his back. "There, that man. Stop him!" he yelled, gesturing to the figure that was drawing near. The hooded figure took out the crossbow and shot the first of the two thugs in the throat as they approached the stairs that led to the gallows, brandishing swords. The figure dropped his crossbow, drew the ninjutsu on his back, and blocked the other thug's downward slash before swiftly stabbing him through the throat with the hidden blade under his left arm. He fell down the stairs as a result. The hooded figure leapt on the thug's shoulders and launched himself at the lieutenant on the gallows, who was attempting to draw his sword as the thug fell to his knees, clutching his throat. The last thing he saw before the figure sent him flying to the ground were two bright blue eyes and a flash of metal light. With a slow motion, Naruto withdrew his hidden blade and rose from the corpse. Turning around, he saw the thugs rushing to attack him from all sides. He prepared his sword as one dashed up the steps, but he didn't see it coming until he saw a sharp metal bolt strike the man in the sword arm, dropping the cleaver like blade and sending him screaming. Without wasting any time, Naruto dispatched the man with ease. Then, he looked up to see Inari standing there, wielding his own crude crossbow and sporting an iron helmet over his head. With a raised crossbow, Inari fired. "For Nami!" exclaimed he. Naruto lifted his own sword and smiled. He exclaimed, "People of Nami, this is your time, take back your home." The people were unable to do anything but stare at the dead criminals and the young child, Inari, who was armed and prepared to fight. And something broke right then. One person suddenly grabbed one of the thugs as they struggled among the crowd, dragging them down while they screamed and yelled, letting out pent-up anger. The remaining thugs were quickly apprehended by the Nami people, who then dragged them to the ground, beat and pummeled them, took their weapons, and stabbed them. As the people let out their fury, a spirit of resistance and rebellion emerged. As soon as the others were taken out of their cage, Naruto leapt to the ground and swiftly released the prisoners hanging on the gallows. When Inari brought his crossbow to him, he grinned and accepted it. "Thanks, kid. You make Kaiza proud," he said. Naruto lowered his hood and swiftly raised his hands to draw their attention as Inari started to cry a little bit and the other Nami people cheered, raising weapons taken from the dead thugs or grabbing other implements. "People of Nami, this is not yet done. Gato is still on the loose, waiting to set Tazuna up for a fall. He believes that today will be his day. Will you allow him, though? Or are you going to fight?" he yelled. Naruto nodded as the crowd applauded and raised their weapons. "Then hurry up." With a shout, he led them from the square to the bridge, a tidal wave intent on destroying the person who had been oppressing them for so long. The Konoha shinobi were currently on the unfinished bridge, hidden behind the fog that Zabuza had created. The missing nin had encountered them there, having previously used the fog to block Gato's view of what was going on the bridge. They now waited, sporadically generating sound and using jutsu to avoid raising Gato's suspicions. The fog would have deadened any sound, but it paid to be cautious. Tazuna and Raphael stood at the edge of the bridge, knowing that below them the same crew was in boats, awaiting orders to climb up and take on Gato's thugs. After 20 minutes or so, Kakashi finally nodded and said, "Everyone, henge, it's about time. Give off the impression that you're exhausted and hurt," he said. After the shinobi finished his henge, Zabuza started to weaken the fog surrounding them, lowering it to give the impression that he was tired. The shinobi quickly completed his henge, and Raphael moved forward to join them. The fog lifted and they soon saw the shapes of Gato and his goons gathered in the wooded area at the end of the bridge. "Gato, get your thugs in here," exclaimed Zabuza, who appeared exhausted, as soon as they were in sight. He bellowed, seemingly requesting assistance. With a sly smile on his face, Gato led his group of thugs and said, "Very sad. The formidable Oni no Kirigakure, pleading for assistance?" he said with a sneer, "You're nothing but an imp, playing big." Leaning on his sword, Zabuza glared at him. "Gato, what the hell are you doing?" With narrowed eyes, he demanded. "You missing nin are far too expensive to keep around," Gato stated bluntly. "I'm taking the appropriate action, as any reputable company would. Men, kill them all." And if you can, take the women as a bonus, he uttered. Anko glanced over her shoulder at the genin. Sasuke, Kiba, you two form a line with Haku. His thugs cheered, raising their weapons, and getting ready to charge, but as they did, Zabuza just grinned as he slowly straightened up, the wounds on his body and the perspiration disappearing. The other shinobi did the same. Our second line is you. Kill any criminal who evades us. You three hit them from a distance, Hinata, Sakura, and Ino. Keep them away from Tazuna. Nodding, the genin and the lone absent nin formed formation, and Raphael, drawing his crossbow, joined Kakashi, Anko, and Zabuza. So, you decided to betray me, Zabuza, scoffed Gato, his confidence unwavering. You shinobi are so untrustworthy. Unreliable. You sack of shish. You're the one who was going to stab us in the back. Here, it's you who is the traitor, not me. You have to be such a cheapskate, or I would have finished the job. Now it will be my pleasure to slowly but thoroughly gut you. With rage and lust for blood in his eyes, Zabuza spoke. It's irrelevant right now. Guys, go for it. With a yell, his thugs came charging forward, Gato yelled. With no time for a third shot, Raphael slung his crossbow onto his back and drew his sword, charging with Anko, Kakashi, and Zabuza. Raphael dropped the first thug as they charged, and Anko immediately launched a spread of kunai and shuriken alongside Kakashi. The front rank of thugs fell to these ranged projectiles, wounded or dead. Muki, who was still concealed by the remaining mist, nodded to his crew members as he heard the roar of battle below. Away boat crews, he yelled, and as grapnels were hurled onto the bridge, Amayuri and Muki led the rout. Same pirates in a swift charge. You must be faster, mi amigo, the assassin said, deflecting a cleaving blade with his dagger and slashing across the throat of said blade's owner with his sword. Zabuza moved to watch Zabuza's back on the bridge, where he cleaved through 4 thugs with a single blow of his sword, spinning it around to deflect a spear at his back and then bringing it down at a thug in front, cutting him vertically in half. Nothing has been visible to you yet, as he whirled the sword around his and Raphael's heads, decapitating 3 thugs who were foolish enough to be in his path. Zabuza yelled with delight, reveling in the carnage. Anko was not far away, using her agility to cut her way through the thugs, slicing through arms and legs, severing throats, leaving her victims crippled or dead. Blood flew off her 2 lacs as she spun, fending off a sword thrust at her, grabbing the man's outstretched arm, leaping and encircling her legs around his head as she grabbed the neck of another thug nearby. With a strong spin and twist, she snapped both of their necks as she spun in the air, landing and swiftly moving on to her next victims. With his Sharingan, he was able to easily dance around the clumsy moves of the thugs, anticipating their moves and using his years of experience to his advantage, breaking bones with his taijutsu, killing them with a single kunai. But the numbers told a different story. The thugs were slowly pushing them back, and now that they were behind the adult shinobi, they were charging towards the genin that stood between them and Tazuna. Hinata led the third line, announcing, "Get ready, girls," with her bow out and an arrow nocked to it. Haku, Sasuke, and Kiba prepared for battle. As the thugs got closer to Sasuke and Kiba, Ino and Sakura both held kunai and shuriken and waited. Then Hinata yelled, "Fire!" The 3 kunoichi started to shower the thugs with arrows, kunai, and shuriken, dropping more as they got closer to the trio before the girls did. With her eyes narrowed behind her mask, Haku prepared her senbon. "Be ready," she said, but Kiba merely growled back. "Now let's just strike them," he shouted, as Akamaru transformed into him, and both took on a slightly more feral appearance consisting of longer nails and canine teeth, before they charged forward. "Gatsuga! Fang over fang!" he yelled, turning into a pair of twisters and slamming into the thugs' front ranks with Akamaru. "Goddamn you, Kiba!" Sasuke yelled as he and Haku were compelled to charge in order to cover the brazen Inuzuka's back. Hinata, in the meantime, raised her bow and pulled her naginata back, readying it. Sakura and Ino, in particular, shuddered a little, realizing how much closer the violence was now. Taking 2 kunai in hand, Sasuke grunted as he used all he had learned and practiced to cut his way through the thugs, but he had to keep his guard up because they were all around him and he had to keep checking his back. Once he was hemmed in, he jumped up and ran through hand signs before letting loose a massive fireball at the thugs below him. Many of them were caught in the blast and screamed as they were burned alive. Those caught on the periphery were also burned, whimpering as they fell to the ground clutching their burnt limbs. While all of this was going on, Haku moved through the thugs with ease, grabbing their weapons and crippling them with their own tools, or stabbing them at critical points on their bodies with senbon, leaving them bleeding and in agony on the ground. She was a blur, barely visible to any of them except a green and white blur that left them bleeding and in pain on the ground. Akamaru rushed to join Kiba, who was still tearing through the thugs with him, but had to stop eventually because he was getting too dizzy. He was surrounded by thugs and he growled as he resorted to the Inuzuka taijutsu style, using a wild flurry of punches, kicks, and claw-like slashes to drive his opponents back. Muki and his group climbed onto the bridge at this precise moment, with the first people to ascend drawing their weapons. "Come on boys. The Konoha shinobi cannot have all the fun." With his crew cheering him on, Muki yelled as he dashed forward, with more crew members trailing behind. As this wave of reinforcements rushed up from the water end of the unfinished bridge, Gato could only snarl angrily and say, "Push them back." He yelled to his goons, but they were too clumsy to follow orders. More than half of them were still stuck trying to injure the 4 adults who were tearing through them, and the same pirates were now killing the genin that had gotten ahead of them. "Let's go," growled Kiba as he and the pirates advanced. He let out a cry, but was cut down by a spear. He turned to run away, but as he did, blood spurted out of the man's chest from a blade piercing through it from behind. His eyes widened as he rolled to one side to avoid the collapsing corpse, landing on a familiar hilt. Turning around, he saw Hinata approaching and removing her sword from the thug's back. She hurriedly said, "Watch yourself, Inuzuka-san," before heading back to watch over Tazuna with Ino and Sakura. But both girls were just standing there, stunned, the mist having vanished and they could clearly see the carnage, the blood on the ground, the severed limbs, the wounded calling out for help, pleading for mercy, but most of all, what stayed in their memories were the bodies riddled with kunai and shuriken. Weapons they had thrown, that they had used to end these people's lives. Hinata shook her head, moving and touching Ino's shoulder, making the girl look at her blankly. "Take care of her." Hinata nodded to Sakura as Ino just stood there, staring at the bodies, while Sakura dropped to her hands and knees and started to throw up. While Hinata was waiting for any of the thugs to manage to get past the pirates, which did not seem likely, Ino looked down at Sakura, stared at her for a few moments, then nodded before kneeling next to her and lightly touching her shoulders. Gato was beginning to realize the same thing. He had assumed that his thugs would have the advantage over the shinobi simply because of their sheer numbers. Even after learning that Zabuza had duped him and that none of the shinobi had been weakened by battle, he still believed that his men would have enough of an advantage over the shinobi because of their sheer numbers and the fact that the shinobi could not use all of their ninjutsu without demolishing the bridge. It was obvious that Gato had underestimated the shinobi's resourcefulness, as he saw the pirates now combining forces with Junin to push his thugs back even further. With a growl, Gato grabbed the closest group of thugs and said, "We're leaving here. Make a circle around me," he said. The thugs quickly followed suit, and when Gato turned around, he saw the Nami villagers leaping out of the trees, slaying any retreating thugs they came across and yelling hysterically as they rushed the bridge. Gato cursed, realizing that he and his men were now trapped on all sides. A silence descended upon the field as the remaining thugs collapsed back into the ring encircling Gato, trapping the shinobi and pirates on one side and the Nami villagers on the other. However, Raphael moved forward to stop anyone from charging. "You guys, right now, I'm going to give you an option. I swear, if you lay down your weapons, you won't perish today. Regardless of whether your crimes warrant imprisonment or execution, you will at least live to witness a fair trial. Gato is all we desire." With his sword drawn and his bloody drippings, he said, "Give him to us, and you'll live." The thugs exchanged glances before one of them said, "Screw this." He quickly moved away from Gato and dropped his club, saying, "I ain't dying for this midget." "Traitors, all of you," yelled a furious Gato as the others quickly followed suit, dropping their weapons and walking away. "I'll see you all dead, I swear," he shouted, before pointing his cane at the citizens of Nami. "And you ought to be appreciative that I allowed you to share my air. Are you unaware of who I am? From Clan Shimada. I am Gato. A family of strong and noble samurai, until your kind appeared." With a gesture that caused the shinobi's sunglasses to fall off, Gato pointed at him, displaying anger and a hint of insanity in his eyes. "My ancestors were removed from power because of you freaks and your chakra. By common peasants. Compelled to exist as filthy merchants only, too. But not any longer. People like my father and grandfather won't have to live like dirt any longer. We should be the lords of this land. Those who ought to serve us will no longer have to live pitiful lives while proud samurai families enjoy all the glory. It's the end of your time." Gato shouted madly, drawing a sword out of his cane and charging towards Raphael. "Die!" As he charged, he shouted. But Muki stepped in front of him, knocking his sword to the side. "You will answer to me, Gato, before anyone else," he said, holding his sword dangerously. Muki just calmly parried or blocked each blow as if it were nothing, almost contemptuously turning aside each one. Gato, foam at the corners of his mouth and mad rage in his eyes, yelled as he lunged at Muki, swinging his cane sword wildly. Gato's attacks eventually became weaker and slower as fatigue overtook him. Muki then applied pressure, his sword slicing around Gato's like lightning, causing tiny stab wounds and cuts all over the business tycoon's body before the cane sword curled off to the side and fell over the bridge. Gato collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath, and said, damn you all, I'm trying to get up," he yelled, but Muki booted him down and put his sword to Gato's throat. With his sword sheathed and cleaned, Raphael stepped forward and greeted Gato, who was glaring up at him. "Muki, wait," he said. "I can guarantee you a painless demise if you tell me. Refuse, and I will abandon you to the people you have harmed, allowing them to exact their justice on you." Raphael tilted his head to one side, seeing it miss, and then shook his head. "Very well then, what you have left in the mansion and your company will suffice," he said simply, backing away. Gato gave him a sneer before spitting at him. Gato was gazing down at Muki, who said, "You ought to have accepted his offer." Pulling his sword back and slamming the hilt down on Gato's forehead, he said, "Now. You will face justice for all the innocent you've killed." After signaling for two of his crew to come forward and pull the man up, he turned to the Nami people and said, "Many of you have suffered at the hands of this man. So have I and the other members of my crew. For this reason, everyone who so chooses can exact justice on this man tomorrow in the heart of your village for all the suffering, anguish, shame, and loss he has brought about." As the sun shone over the blood-splattered bridge, the people cheered and some began to cry and sob as they realized the truth. They were free, finally free, and for the first time, they felt joy and hope for the future. Silently, Raphael completed filing the numerous documents and dossiers that had been collected from Gato's mansion as well as the warehouses his men had been using, storing them all in different sections of a storage scroll. The people of Nami moved quickly to raid both buildings in search of food supplies, cash, and other valuables that had been seized during Gato's reign, following his defeat and subsequent removal. While he took care of the mansion, Raphael had given Enko instructions to retrieve the records from the warehouse. In short order, the Nami people looted food and other essential supplies from the locations and shared the looted goods with the people, sending out messages asking for help and fresh supplies to be sent in. The majority of the day was spent by the people just soaking everything in. It felt surreal to be free of Gato's harsh control after all the time they had to endure it. But they could tell it was real when they saw him imprisoned in the same cage that some of their fellow citizens had been kept in. As promised, Muki and his group pulled Gato out of the cage and tied him to a stake early the next morning. A large number of Nami residents had gathered and were gazing at the man. While he yelled and cursed at them all, they had all been reluctant to take action out of continued fear of him. That is, until one young man finally found the bravery to charge forward, slamming Gato across the face with a stick and knocking out a few of his teeth. The rest of the people arrived and began hitting and beating Gato with everything they could get their hands on after receiving that signal. Standing by to supervise the entire process and make sure that Gato was kept alive and that the Nami people did not harm one another, was Muke's crew. Those who had personal grudges against Gato also took turns, defeating the business magnate. When the final citizen seeking retribution had finished, Gato's body was a shambling mess. His face was a mass of cuts and bruises, every limb was broken, and he was slumped over with blood streaming from his mouth. He watched helplessly as Muki drew his sword and walked toward him. But before he could say anything, Muki killed him with a single blow to the chest. Then, Gato's body was carried to the seashore and dumped onto a fishing pier. There, it was strapped to rocks and thrown into the water, where it eventually sank to the bottom. There was no cheering from the spectators, no shouting as he vanished into the water. Before returning to their village and continuing with their lives, they just stared in silence. When he had organized all of the intelligence, Raphael grinned. Not as much as he would have preferred, but still a pretty good find. Gato had notes about a number of groups he was providing for that appeared to be associated with the person he was serving. Raphael had discovered the group's name among those notes. Kami no Chitsujo. 1. He could use it to learn more about this group of people. However, what had transpired with Gato on the bridge disturbed him. The man's hatred of shinobi was evident because of what had previously happened to his family, and he appeared to be associated with a group that planned to travel to Tetsu no Kuni, a region populated by samurai warriors. It was likely that this group also harbored similar sentiments toward shinobi if he was employed by them. It's possible that Gato is merely a small cog in a much bigger machine that has the potential to threaten war to the entire continent. When he was done putting the intelligence away, he sighed. When he would have access to reports from his spy network and intelligence from Jiraiya's own spy network back in Konoha, that's when he would worry about it. Anko descended the stairs just as he was beginning to roll the scroll up. He gave her a quick look up before nodding toward the stairs. He inquired, "How are they?" Anko sighed with exhaustion. "Resting, for now. They're still having some trouble coping, but I think they'll be okay," she stated. It's never easy, making your first kill like that. In an attempt to ease the girls' shock over their first human kills, Anko and Hinata had accompanied Sakura and Ino back to Tazuna's house after the battle on the bridge. Between them, the two girls had killed a number of bandits with their shuriken and kunai, and when the battle was over, they were horrified to see the corpses with their weapons protruding from them. After bringing the two girls back to Tazuna's house, Anko and Hinata tried their best to comfort the girls and help them process the fact that they had taken human lives. While both girls had some experience killing a live chicken with their hands and were aware that this was a part of their career, killing a person was a completely different matter. Raphael simply nodded and put the scroll away. "It's good they've got you and Hinata. Hopefully they'll be able to cope with this," he said gently. Anko sighed with exhaustion. She sank to the table, rubbing her forehead, and said, "Yeah, I hope so. Where are the others?" "Naruto is helping clean up the bridge, along with Sasuke and Kiba. Muki and his crew are in the town, helping distribute supplies. I think Muki is trying to keep Amayuri busy. She wasn't exactly happy to see Zabuza," Raphael stated. And that was putting it mildly. Muke's hand on Amayuri's shoulder and all of her self-control were needed to prevent the former Kiri Kunoichi from attacking Zabuza. She held him partially responsible for her ordeal because, in her view, the Mizukage's paranoia resulted from his attempted coup that destroyed the Seven Swordsmen. She thought that she wouldn't have been sold out to Danzu's route and betrayed by her leader if it weren't for Zabuza. As for Zabuza and Haku, they disappeared after the fight on the bridge was done, but not before I got a chance to talk to them and make them an offer. I asked them to pass any information they might uncover to me, in exchange for either money, job opportunities, or intel of my own they might find interesting. So I have a feeling we'll see them again in the future," Raphael continued. "As for Kakashi, he's in town, guarding Tazuna, since that's still his team's mission." Anko merely rubbed her neck and leaned back. After observing her behavior, Raphael approached her. Knowing that the mark would periodically flare up against her seal, he asked, "Your curse mark bothering you again?" She gave him a quick glance before shaking her head. "Nah, I think I just strained a muscle during the fight. Neck and shoulders are a bit sour." Raphael stepped behind her, smiling. He put his hands gently on her shoulders, causing her to blink and turn to face him. "Well, that will never do," he said. She grinned and said, "Don't tell me you're a masseuse as well," to which Raphael responded with a smile and a shoulder rub. His words, "No señorita, but as a gentleman, I can hardly leave a lovely woman in such pain and distress," came as he began to ease her shoulders of tension. Anko simply closed her eyes and cocked her head to make more space for him. Beyond Anko's occasional sighs of contentment or slight winces when he touched sore spots, the two were silent for a few moments. While working silently, Raphael blushed slightly at the sound of Anko's sighs. But when he touched one place, he stopped, and they both blushed as she gave a faint, pleasure-filled gasp. She turned to face him halfway, and he quickly withdrew. "Thank you very much, that's great," Anko grinned. With a little awkwardness, Raphael said, "No problem. Happy to help," turning away. "So, I think I'll go to the bridge, check on Naruto." "That's a great idea," Anko agreed. Nodding to Raphael, she said, "I'll stay here, in case Sakura or Ino need me." Raphael hurriedly left. She blushed and slumped once the door was shut, gently covering her heart, which was beating a little quicker than usual. "You're welcome, girl," she whispered. It had been quite embarrassing, and she couldn't believe she had gasped in that way. Nevertheless, she was unable to dispute that she had relished the sensation of Raphael's fingers. She had never felt anything so sensual or intimate as it had been. She flushed and shook her head. She uttered, "Get it together, girl," attempting to push those ideas out of her head. It was not the moment to entertain rather suggestive ideas about Raphael. With a sigh, she reclined against a wall, closed her eyes, and rested for a short while before grinning when the pain subsided. Naruto moaned as he hauled another thug across to the growing pile of corpses at the bridge. Most of the bodies on the bridge were those of Gato's goons, some of them horribly disfigured from Anko and Zabuza's attacks. There were very few of them that were Muke's crew. For Muke's crew to be able to bury them properly later, they had each been set aside. With a grunt, He placed the corpse on the pile and looked up to see several of the villagers and Sasuke and Kiba carrying another body. He sighed and sat up a little, then blinked when a villager carrying a water canteen walked over. "Here, Naruto. Sama," she grinned and said. Naruto simply laughed a little, accepting it. He took a tiny sip from the canteen and said, "Thank you, but you don't have to call me Naruto. Sama." Kiba merely gave a quiet growl. "Look at that. Fawning over him, when we were the ones fighting on the bridge here. And what did he do?" he grumbled. As they let go of the body, Sasuke sighed softly. He questioned, "What is your problem with him? You've been antagonistic towards him ever since our first day at the academy. Why?" "Because he challenged me. At our taijutsu lesson, he challenged me. I'm the heir of the Inuzuka clan. I'm an alpha. And I can't have some loser challenge my authority, if I'm going to be the best alpha my clan has ever seen," Kiba grumbled. With an angry snarl, Kiba declared, "I'll stop having a problem with him when he's at my feet, where he belongs." Compared to other clans, the Inuzuka clan was more instinctive and emotional by nature. This resulted from the close relationship they developed with their dog friends. They frequently developed a more canine mindset in order to become more like their companions and collaborate with them. A few stood out, such as Hana, Kiba's elder sister, who appeared to have an innate capacity for animal bonding. However, for the majority of Inuzuka, such as Kiba and his mother Sume, they had to go above and beyond. Kiba saw Naruto as a rival and a danger to his standing in his clan. How could he establish his alpha status among his own clan members if he couldn't even convince someone like Naruto of it? He saw his victory over Naruto as a means of securing his own place in the clan. Shaking his head, Sasuke went to get another body. It was unclear to him why Kiba felt the need to assert some kind of dominance. He had attempted it soon after the team was formed in an attempt to take charge of the group. After being knocked out by Sasuke, he appeared to accept his position as second in command, even though Sasuke knew Kiba was putting a lot of effort into his training, most likely in preparation for a future challenge from Sasuke. Sasuke was then motivated to train even harder as a result. With Naruto, however, things were different. Rather than merely having a rivalry, Kiba appeared to harbor animosity towards the boy. With some respect for his fellow genin, Sasuke cast a quick glance in Naruto's direction. Naruto had entered the town square by himself, triumphed, and inspired the villagers to join him in the battle at the bridge. Additionally, he had competed well against Sasuke in their sparring session. Because of these things, Sasuke had some respect for Naruto, but he also harbored jealousy and rage in a darker part of himself. After his father's death and Itachi's betrayal, Sasuke trained diligently to become the strongest member of his clan and demonstrate that his clan still had powerful shinobi. Sasuke was jealous of Naruto's strength and concerned that he wasn't strong enough when he found himself alone with the man who had no living clan members or bloodline to support him. He dismissed those ideas with a shake of his head and went back to work. When they returned to Konoha following the mission, he would discuss further training with his mother. Maybe Kaseki himself could assist. She was a fierce fighter who had spent a lot of time with his mother. Perhaps she could give him more strength. Having made plans, he began disposing of the corpses. Following Tazuna around the village while in town, Kakashi couldn't help but think things over. The battle on the bridge had proceeded pretty much as planned. The sight of Naruto arriving with the villagers behind him and prepared for battle was something he hadn't anticipated. For an instant, it felt like he was seeing Minato Sensei again, encouraging his fellow shinobi to oppose Iwa. However, Kakashi believed that Naruto's actual potential was not being fully realized. The boy possessed incredible amounts of chakra, and with his guidance, he had the potential to become an extremely formidable ninjutsu shinobi. Not to mention the way he was. If Naruto had been assigned to him as he desired, he could have been the center of attention for his team. Kakashi was aware that he could have atoned for his youthful mistakes and formed a Team 7 that was just as powerful as the Sannin with Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura. But he was realizing more and more that was probably just a dream. Naruto's attachment to Anko and Hinata, his teammate, was excessive. Not to add that he appeared to be attached to that assassin. At the thought of that, Kakashi scowled. It infuriated him to think that his sensei's son was a cold-blooded killer. Indeed, killing was a necessary part of the job for all shinobi, but assassinations were a different kind of killing. It was cold-blooded murder, not a fight to protect your family or friends. Yes, Captain Kakashi had carried out his fair share of assassinations during his time as an ANBU, but he detested the thought of his sensei's son carrying out the same crime frequently. As he read his book, he sighed softly. He was aware that there was nothing he could do right now. He could, however, set the foundation. He would provide some ninjutsu instruction up until the Chunin examinations. He would train Sasuke to be the greatest, and after Sasuke defeated Naruto, he could at least ask for Naruto to be added to his team so that he could take Sasuke's place, who would surely get promoted. He followed Tazuna while grinning at his plan and considering his new strategy. After a week standing on the bridge near the nearly finished end with the Nami people, Muki and his crew, and the Konoha shinobi, Tazuna smiled. He stood over the final section of the bridge that needed to be finished, one hand holding a hammer and the other a metal stake. He looked out at the crowd before he spoke. People applauded and clapped as he said, "Today is a day of celebration. The completion of a dream and new life for our country." However, as he went on, they became quieter. "When I started this bridge, it was with the hope that this bridge would save our country from Gato. But it was not just this bridge, and my efforts that saved Nami. It was these brave people, who came to our aid from Konoha. Who, despite my deception, chose to stay and help us when we needed it most. What's more though, they taught us to hope for a better tomorrow, and to never back down or bow to an enemy, no matter what, like Kaiza before them. They are true heroes of Nami. And so, I hereby wish to dedicate this bridge to them, and name it the Great Heroes Bridge," he continued. As he drove the last stake into the ground to finish the bridge, the crowd cheered once more. The shinobi and Muke's crew cheered him on as he was soon lifted onto the shoulders of the people and carried back towards Nami. A festival had been organized in the town square to commemorate their release and the completion of the bridge. And now, as food stands started serving meals and vendors started selling what few goods they had, crowds of people poured into the festival. But the people didn't give a damn. What was important was that it was their first opportunity to laugh, celebrate, and enjoy themselves in a long time. The Konoha shinobi were the guests of honor, of course, since they had saved Nami. Naruto smiled and spoke with Inari while grabbing a squid skewer. "You know, that was pretty brave of you, kid. The way you showed up and shot that guy in the arm," said the man. Inari happily ate a rice ball, nodding. "Well, I wanted to finally stop being afraid, and be a hero like my dad was and like you are." Grinning, Naruto fluffed up his hat. He remarked, "That's good, kid. This place is going to need someone to watch over and protect it," as Inari attempted to swat him. "Just don't forget to enjoy being a kid too. You've got plenty of time," said the man. All Inari did was nod and smile. He said, "You got it," as they both munched on their snacks. They saw Hinata, Ino, and Sakura together as soon as they started to move through the festival. With the help of Anko and Hinata, Ino and Sakura were able to accept the shock of killing their first human. Though they had remained fairly quiet and reserved, Naruto could now see smiles on both girls' faces as they conversed with Hinata. Their pain was compounded by the sight of all the people they had saved by fighting the thugs. Naruto smiled when Hinata waved at him, but then he noticed Inari chuckling slightly. He questioned, "She your girlfriend, Naruto ni-san?" as Naruto flushed. He shook his head and said, "What? No way. She's just a really good friend and my teammate." While Naruto turned away and moaned softly about brats, Inari simply smiled. Hinata merely gave Naruto a quick blink. As Ino simply snickered, she questioned, "I wonder what that's about." She stated, "What indeed, having some knowledge beforehand." Sakura giggled a little too, causing Hinata to glance at them both. With naive smiles on their faces, Sakura and Ino asked, "What do you two know that I don't?" "Oh, nothing," Sakura uttered quietly while continuing to giggle a little, while Hinata simply blinked at them, perplexed. One person was missing from the celebrations. Right now Muki was sitting at the docks, silently gazing out to sea. His crew was having a great time having a party with the locals. However, he had no desire to celebrate. He had spent a great deal of time tracking down Gato and damaging his business. He had exacted revenge on his family and hometown. And now, well, he was at a loss for what to do. When he heard someone approaching, he didn't even react until they were standing next to him. However, he raised an eyebrow after spotting them out of the corner of his eye. He said, "I'm surprised you're not celebrating," to Raphael's amusement. "There will be plenty of time. But I figured since you weren't at the festival, now would be a good a time as any to come to you with an offer," he said, as Muki looked at him. He questioned, "An offer? For what?" After staring at the sea for a while, Raphael turned to face him. "Muki, you've helped me and my comrades out with quite a lot of information over the years. I know you're someone I can trust. And now that you've completed your mission, your vengeance, I wish to offer you a place in my organization. If you're willing, Muki, I'd like to make you an assassin." Muki simply blinked at him, his expression bewildered. "You want to make me an assassin? Why?" he inquired. "And why should I accept?" "Right now, we're small, Muki. The assassins have little or no influence outside of Konoha itself. I've managed to build up an intelligence network, but there are still areas of the world that I need agents in. What's more though, I need more assassins, who can operate in other countries and start to build up the assassin's presence. That is why I'm asking you. You're someone I think can be a good assassin. But as to why you should accept, I can't give you answer to that. Only you can. If you're not interested, I understand, Raphael said, leaving the ball in Muke's court. Before speaking, Muke studied him for a few minutes while keeping a quiet gaze. What precisely would I be doing? He inquired. As he responded, Raphael felt a glimmer of hope appear in his chest. You'd be doing something similar to what you've been doing. Except instead of hunting down one single man, you'd be looking for others like him. You'd pass any information you find back to me, and I would send you orders then on what to do regarding the information you sent. And when the time came, you'd take out targets assigned to you, hopefully in a discreet manner. And before you ask, no, I would not just be asking you to randomly kill people who are a threat to me or my friends. The assassins target specific people, people who threaten the freedom and welfare of mankind. We work in the darkness, to serve the light, said Raphael. Muke sighed as he turned his head away. Please allow me time to think on this, he replied. I'll have an answer for you by tomorrow. For now, I wish to give it some thought, and see what my crew wishes to do now as well. I understand. I'll come find you tomorrow, before the Konoha teams have to return home. Do try to enjoy the festival though. We all could use the distraction, Raphael replied as he left. He nodded to Amayuri as he went by and grinned at the sight of her. Amayuri shrugged and blinked before trailing behind Muke and giving him a hug. She asked him, what was that about? As Muke leaned back a little into her embrace. He turned to face her and put his own arms around her, grinning. Raphael was making me an offer. I'll tell you about it later, he said. Now what brings you down here, and away from the festivities? She grinned and said, the fact that my captain isn't enjoying himself and buying me some pretty little trinket, to which Muke laughed. Amayuri pulled him down into a kiss, her tongue eagerly slipping between his lips. Oh, no pretty little trinket will do for you. No, you deserve to have the finest. Perhaps a new sword, or a new whetstone to sharpen your blade on, or MMMPH, he exclaimed. After holding him there for a short while, she started to move away. He laughed and put an arm around her as they made their way to the festival. You always think of the best gifts, she grinned. The festival was in full swing in town, and people were having a great time. Raphael smiled as he strolled through the village, witnessing the happiness and joy that had taken the place of the despair and hopelessness that had pervaded it upon their initial arrival. He smiled at the sensation of a hug from behind. Anko pouted, there you are. You left me all alone, then released him and smiled. Come on, we've got a festival to have fun in, she replied. Her pulling him along made Raphael laugh. He said, you seem excited, as she turned to face him. As they got to one of the gaming stalls, she smiled and exclaimed, hell yeah. We kicked butt, saved this village, and are being treated like heroes. I'm going to live it up. She gave him a smile. The game involved the players scooping out as many small plastic balls from a pool of water as they could using a small hoop that had a thin sheet of paper, known as a poi, held in the center. Care to try your luck against me? She asked. Anko smiled, as did Raphael, as he took a poi. After flashing a smile, the stall owner yelled, go. The two got to work right away, trying their hardest to carefully remove the balls without tearing the poi's paper. Anko smiled when she eventually had multiple balls, then looked over to see Raphael was matching her balls ball for ball. She simply growled in competition and returned her attention to collecting the balls. After 1 minute of each other's company, Raphael's poi paper tore slightly, causing a calamity to befall him. Anko grinned as he grimaced and slowed down, being more cautious. She exclaimed, ha, victory will be mine. At that moment, her poi broke entirely, causing the paper to tear off and float in the water. Before the timer ran out, Anko groaned as Raphael scored a few more balls. He smiled, realizing he had the greater number of plastic balls. The stall owner announced, we have a winner, and gave Raphael a mask as a reward. Spotting that it was shaped like a wolf face, Raphael smiled and slid it on. He asked, how'd I look? While Anko smiled back at him. Ooh, very intimidating. Maybe we should all get something like that, she replied. Taking off the mask, Raphael examined it. He mumbled, that's actually not a bad idea. We'll see when we get back to Konoha. Anko accepted the mask and examined it. She looked curious and said, so where were you earlier? As they strolled, Raphael looked around, taking in the festivities. I was offering Muke a chance to become an assassin, he stated. I feel he could be a good member, and could be even more of an asset out here in the East, he stated. Besides, dealing with Gato has shown we're dealing with something far bigger than one criminal kingpin. We'll need more people outside of Konoha to handle whatever Gato was a part of, he continued. She inquired, you think he'll accept? With curiosity. As they moved through the festival, Raphael shrugged and replaced the mask. I hope he does, but I can understand if he doesn't. He's spent several years hunting Gato. He might want peace now that Gato is dead. At the same time, he may be seeking something to do, now that Gato is gone. I guess we'll see, he said while they were walking. For now though, let's not talk about business. This is a time to celebrate and relax, he stated. As they strolled about, she blinked as she noticed a few young ladies giggling as they studied Raphael. Ooh, well, what should we talk about? She asked. It appears that you have a following, she remarked, despite a slight jealousy flare up inside of her. Raphael shrugged, having noticed them too. Just some hero worship, he smiled back at her. Anko merely gave him a smile in return and nudged an elbow into his side. Don't sell yourself short. They probably are thinking you're quite a catch, she stated. Raphael looked at her and said, huh? You're kidding me, right? She said, oh come on, you're such a great guy. She stopped and said, you're funny, you're strong, you're considerate, and you're handsome, realizing now what she had said. Though blushing, Raphael smiled a little. She waved her hand and he said, you think I'm handsome, huh? So what? You already knew that, she said, averting her eyes. Raphael gave a small smile and then stopped. Raphael turned to face Anko, who turned to look at him somewhat confused. Raphael. Raphael inhaled deeply. He smiled shyly at her and said, listen, Anko. I was kind of wondering if maybe sometime back in Konoha when we're not both busy, if you'd like to possibly go out on a date with me. Anko's gaze expanded. She questioned, looking surprised, you want to go on a date with me? He smiled at her again and shrugged. He asked, yeah, is that a problem? She turned her head away and blushed. She inhaled deeply and said, well, I guess that wouldn't be a horrible idea. With a slight smile on her face, she replied, yeah, that would be okay. Reaching over to put an arm around her shoulder, he said, well, okay then. He said, now how about we find another game for me to beat you at? But Anko pouted the entire time and he gasped for air after taking a punch to the stomach. People started to congregate near the dock, where a fireworks show was scheduled. As the day went on and evening approached, they had discovered a stash of them amidst the stock in one of the warehouses under Gato's authority. Seated on a small hill overlooking the dock area, Naruto found himself smiling with Hinata as they looked forward to the fireworks display as the orange sky began to turn blue. With a sigh, Naruto reclined on the hillside grass. It was enjoyable today, he remarked. Hinata smiled and nodded as well, joining him. Yep. It's great that we could help these people, and see them all so happy, she replied. She whispered, it almost makes me wish we didn't have to go back to Konoha. With a quiet sigh, Naruto let out, indeed, he replied. Even though his circumstances in Konoha had somewhat improved, most people continued to give him strange looks or attempt to ignore him. Hinata's situation wasn't much better either. Her clan expelled her. Since everyone in the village was aware of what had happened to her, they tended to ignore her out of a desire to avoid upsetting the Hyuga. Hinata's circumstances weren't all that dissimilar from Naruto's when you considered that she cohabitated with Anko, another victim of the village exclusion. However, they received distinct treatment in this village, treated with decency, appreciation, and camaraderie. It was a significant departure from Konoha life. Such thoughts caused Naruto to shake his head. Still, it'll be nice to get back to Konoha. Maybe we could grab a bowl of ramen to celebrate our first A-ranked mission, he joked. At that, Hinata blushed slightly and looked over him. Oh, I suppose I could go for a bowl or two, she replied. Naruto exclaimed, beaming broadly, awesome. With a look back up at the sky, he said, can't wait to get some Ichiraku. Hinata simply chuckled softly and shook her head in response to her best friend's antics. She gave him another glance and blushed a little. Actually, though, she wouldn't have objected if her best friend had suggested going on a date. She shook her head and blushed at that, flicking a quick glance at him while playing around with one of her bangs. At just 13, they were still quite young. That's probably not how Naruto saw girls. Later, when he was older, there would be time. She grinned as the fireworks started, and they sat back to enjoy the spectacle together. The following day, Muki inhaled deeply as he stood in front of his ship's crew. His words, "We've been together for some time now, lads," were met with nods from the crew. When we first started, this was a venture of revenge. We were brought together by a common goal, a need to see the one who destroyed our lives pay for what he did. And now, our need is sated. The one we sought lies dead at the bottom of these very waters, food for the fish and scavengers of the ocean floor. A number of the men nodded somberly, relieved to have finally brought down the person who had ruined their families. Muki waited for a short while before moving on. He moved to a chest he had placed nearby and said, "Now that he is gone, we are all free. Free to pursue whatever life it is we choose to follow. And I wish to help you follow whatever path your heart desires." He opened it and held up a wad of cash. "This is a portion of the profits we've taken from Gato over the years. The money in this chest, it belongs to all of us here," he said. "Any man who wishes to leave, you'll receive your share of the profits, and I'll drop you off as close as I can to wherever it is you wish to go. This is my word, and you know that I never break it," he stated. At this, a crew member raised his voice. "What about you, Muki? What will you do now?" he inquired. Muki grinned in response. "I'm glad you asked. I've been given an offer from our old friend Raphael.San, he replied. "An offer that I've decided to accept. I'm going to train under him, and afterwards, I'm going to continue working out here, doing whatever it is I can. Whether it be a trader, a privateer, or a pirate. That is what I'm going to do. Any of you who wish to join me can stay. And any of you who wish to follow a new life, I wish you all the luck in the world," he concluded. For a few moments, the crew was silent, and then Amayuri moved forward. "There's nowhere else I can go," she uttered. "And even if I did, well, I've had more fun on this old termite tub than I ever had being a kunoichi of Kiri. I'm with you, Captain," she grinned. Another member of the crew came forward. You've always steered us right, I'm with you, Muki." As more people joined, one more exclaimed, "And me. You can't get rid of me that easy, Skipper. I'm with you too. Rather be out on the sea in a squall, than on land with a daimyo's tacksman. Count me in." There was a cheer from the entire crew, and Muki smiled a little. He nodded, tucking the money back into the chest. As the crew got to work, he exclaimed, "Then get ready for sail. We'll be leaving soon to purchase supplies for the village." As he made his way to the dock and the gangplank, Amayuri came up to him. Muki turned to face her. "So you're going to become an assassin?" she inquired. "I am. If it means I can help people who suffer at the hands of people like Gato, then I feel like I need to do this," he stated. Amayuri grinned and nodded. She smiled and said, "Okay then. And hey, who knows? Maybe I can pass a few tricks on to you. We'll be ready to go by the time you get back," she replied. With a nod, Muki kissed her and went ashore to look for Raphael. The people of Nami had assembled to witness their heroes preparing to leave, bidding adieu to those who had freed them. Right now, the shinobi teams were gathered at the bridge's Nami side, waiting for Raphael, who was nowhere to be found. Kiba growled out, eager to return to Konoha and start training. Thankfully, he spoke quietly enough that the villagers were unaware of his words. "Well, when can we get going?" he asked. Kakashi just turned a page in his book. "Patience, Kiba. We'll be going soon enough," he replied. Raphael showed up as Naruto was bidding Inari farewell and giving him some tips on how to train with his crossbow and other things. Enko saw him and smiled. "Are you set to go?" she inquired. After a brief moment of hesitation, Raphael shook his head. He leaned in close to her and said, "Not exactly. I'm going to be staying here for a few months. Muki accepted my offer. I'm going to be spending time training him until he's capable of handling things on his own." That caused Enko to blink. "I see. But what about things back at headquarters? If something comes up, how will we contact you?" she inquired. "We'll be staying here near Nami for a while. Muki and his crew plan to help the people here get back on their feet. Only time we'll move away from the island is if it's part of Muke's training, or to get supplies from Mizu," Raphael stated. "So send a message here, and I'll get it fairly quick. In the meantime, I'm leaving you in charge of operations in Konoha." Raphael laughed as Anko whimpered, "Ah, really? Why not Yugito or Kaseki? They're much better at doing paperwork than I am." "Anko, come on. You're my most senior assassin. Not to mention that with a Genin team, you'll be in Konoha a lot more than Yugito and Kaseki will be," he replied. Anko merely sulked. Raphael nodded and she said, "Okay, but you better spoil me a lot when it comes to that date." After saying, "I will. Count on it," he turned to face Naruto and Hinata, who joined them. "I'm going to be staying here a few months. Anko is going to be in charge while I'm gone. Understand?" he inquired. Both of them saluted him with a nod. "Yes, mentor," he nodded and they both said, "All right then. You all be careful while I'm gone. Okay. Keep training hard while I'm gone. Oh, and Anko? See about sending the components for a pair of hidden blade bracers down here to Nami, he said with a grin on his face. I'll see you in a few months. With a nod, the three assassins turned to walk away, and Raphael waved them off. Kakashi looked up as they joined Ino and Team 7. Where is Raphael-san? He inquired, glancing at the cloaked red figure casually walking off. Anko simply gestured for them to move on. He's staying here for a bit, on some business, said Anko. We're ready to go. Kakashi simply nodded as the teams said their final goodbyes to the Nami people and started to cross the bridge to return to Konoha. The people at the Nami side of the bridge watched their heroes go. With a smile, Tazuna touched Inari's shoulder tenderly. Kami blessed us the day those people came to help us, he uttered quietly. With a simple smile and nod, Inari observed the person with blonde hair walk away. Be at ease, Ni-san. What you taught me will stick with me. As he watched the Konoha shinobi go, he grinned and thought, I'll be a hero, just like you and Otou, Sama. Glancing at the two Junin and their teams, Sarutobi remarked, I must say, that's quite the debriefing. They had just returned from their missions, reporting back to Nami on what had happened and informing Sarutobi that Raphael would be spending some time in that region. Since Team 7 and Kakashi didn't need to know any more, Anko didn't go into further detail. Yes, sir, Kakashi responded, getting to his feet. Tazuna assured us that reparations would be made to Konoha for the false mission labeling as soon as Nami had regained its economy. They've sent proposed terms on payment, which they are open to negotiate on. Sarutobi nodded as Kakashi placed the suggested terms on the table. Very well, Team 7, congratulations. You're dismissed. Team 8, remain for your own debrief. Anko now advanced as Team 7 departed. The man handed over the scroll containing copies of the information Raphael had gathered from Gato's mansion and said, Hokage. Sama, we completed our mission in assisting Team 7, as well as Raphael-san in investigating and bringing down Gato. Raphael-san also wanted me to inform you that he'll be staying in the area to train a potential new assassin down there. He's left me in charge in the meantime. After accepting the scroll, Sarutobi nodded. I get it, he replied. Do you know when he will return? Anko stated that it won't likely be for some months. Nervous about taking the lead in the assassins, she added in her head, hopefully as soon as possible. Sarutobi dismissed them and opened the information scroll, saying, very well, then. You will be receiving your pay shortly. You're dismissed. And congratulations on a job well done. Team 8 all bowed and left his office, starting to look over the data in front of him. Anko turned to her genin outside the Hokage's tower and fixed her gaze on Ino. Listen, Ino, she uttered. I want you to go home and talk to your dad about what happened in Nami. Okay? He can help you come to grips with everything that happened. Take some time off and recuperate, alright? With a quiet nod, Ino looked down. She said, yeah. Alright sensei, only raising her head in response to Anko's shoulder contact. As Ino nodded once more, she continued, and if you need anything, let me know, okay? You can talk to me too, if you need to, before making her way out. Anko turned to face her other two students and inhaled deeply. Right. Well, we're going to take it easy for a bit here. D. Rank missions for the next few weeks, maybe a C rank or two if she's feeling up to it. So you two should have lots of time to continue training, she told them. For now though, go home, take a shower, and relax. You've got the day off. We'll reconvene tomorrow at the usual place, and move on from there. Naruto, make sure you get some rest, because there's something I want to talk to you about tomorrow as well, Anko said while nodding to the blonde. You got it, sensei, Naruto remarked, a little apprehensive about the topic of conversation. Anko smiled at Hinata and said, okay, well I'll see you tomorrow Naruto. And see you later, Imouto-chan, before leaving. With a weary sigh, Hinata turned to face Naruto. She questioned, so, what shall we do now? Naruto grinned and said, I think I promised you some Ichiraku, if you're interested. Hinata gave a small, remembering nod. Then shall we? As they made their way to the food, Hinata remarked, that does sound good. Some food, and then home. Meanwhile, Ino crept into her house and took a quick look around. She yelled, I'm home, but then smiled to see her mother arrive. Rushing over to give her a hug, she exclaimed, Ino, I'm so glad to see you. You're safe and back, she said, clutching her. After a brief pause, Ino gave her mother a firm hug. Tears were streaming from her eyes as she whispered, Mom, it's so good to see you. Sensing something was off, Ino's mother stayed in her daughter's embrace but retreated enough to see her face. She asked her daughter, "Sweetie? What happened?" Sniffling, Ino tried to push away her tears. Can we find Daddy? I need to talk to you both," she stated. Instead of asking questions, her mother just nodded and guided Ino to the flower shop next door. Boredom was making Inochi sigh softly as he sat silently behind the cash register. Right now, he had no work to do, no clients, and no call from the Hokage asking for his expertise. Regarding his daughter, whose team was still on a mission, he was also a little concerned. That's why it was a welcome surprise when his wife and little girl came in. He smiled and got to his feet. He exclaimed, "Sweetie, you're back," before realizing that his daughter had been crying, albeit a little. "Ino?" Ino shuddered a little. Daddy," she uttered before hurriedly embracing him and pressing her face against his chest. Inoichi blinked while firmly holding his daughter. He held on to her and said, "Sweetie, what happened? What's wrong?" But all his daughter could do was cry and cling to her father, releasing all of her feelings. The relief to be home with her family, the fear of fights that could have killed her, the fatigue from the mission, and the horror of the killing. Inoichi grasped her, casting a worried glance at his spouse, who gave a helpless shrug. Inoichi gave Ino a quick pat on the back while he listened to her sob in an attempt to try and piece together what had happened. When Ino settled down at last, she hiccuped a little and withdrew. "I apologize. I'm just glad to be back," she said, grinning at her dad. He knelt down to face her and gently asked, "So you're not hurt? Nothing bad happened on your mission?" Ino just shrugged and hiccuped once more. "Well, none of us were really badly hurt, if that's what you mean," she replied. "But, Daddy, there was a lot of fighting and killing, and I killed people," she uttered quietly, her eyes still welling with tears. Inoichi's expression lit up like a flash of realization as he took her shoulders gently. He gently wiped a few tears from her cheeks and said, "I see. It's okay, sweetie. You're safe now. You did what you had to do out there." Ino gave a quiet nod. "I know, Dad, but still, they were going to kill us. They were coming at us, to kill us. Or worse," she murmured. "And then me and Sakura, we were throwing our kunai and shuriken, and there was blood, and they were on the ground, they were dead, and we killed them." Inoichi simply held her near. He looked at his wife, who nodded, and said, "I know, sweetie. I know. But you're here now. Mommy and Daddy are going to help you. And Sakura too, if she needs it." She put her hand on her daughter's shoulder and said, "Your father is right, Ino. We're here for you." Glancing at her, Ino moved to give her a hug while continuing to sniffle. Inoichi silently bemoaned his inability to shield his daughter from this while he observed her. Even though it was a necessary aspect of the life she had chosen, he still found it difficult to see her in this way. In silence, he made the decision to ask his friends Shikaku Nara and Shuza Akamichi if they could persuade their boys to change. He was confident that spending time with their 3 children would benefit Ino. And Sakura too, should she participate. As she gave her mother a hug, he leaned down and gave his daughter a quiet kiss on top of her head. He would do whatever it took to help his daughter through this. Somewhere, after completing his first C-ranked mission successfully, Sasuke sighed as he entered the Uchiha district, feeling both exhausted and slightly excited. Alternatively put, C-ranked became A ranked. He felt pleased with himself for having won so soon after graduating. Even though most of the work had been done by Kakashi, Anko, and that Raphael guy, he was still proud of himself for finishing a mission as risky and important as this one. It simply demonstrated that he was getting closer to his objectives of demonstrating the Uchiha's continued strength as a clan and developing enough strength to hold his brother accountable for his misdeeds. He felt someone close by as he blinked through the gates. He turned to see Kaseki in a hooded form. Blinking in surprise, he said, "Kaseki Chan? What are you doing here?" Kaseki walked up to Sasuke grinning. "I saw you returning from your mission, and thought I'd greet you, so how did it go?" she inquired. Sasuke's eyebrows shot up. "It went well. We completed our objective, and helped Team 8 complete theirs. Though I think you have some idea on what it was they were doing," he continued. Walking toward the clan chief's house, Kaseki tilted her head inquiringly. She inquired, "What do you mean, Sasuke?" Sasuke pointed to her hood and said, "You wear clothing similar to what Anko, Sensei, Naruto, and that man Raphael wear. Not to mention those bracers you've got as well. They even have that same emblem on them as well. So I think whatever it is they're up to, you're a part of it too," he said. Kaseki gave him a look. "Well, you are right, Sasuke. I am part of a special group. Though rest assured, my group is nothing you need to worry about. After Well, after what happened they helped me cope with things, Kaseki blunted. So don't worry about it. I'm not worried, but if you are part of this group, then, perhaps you could answer a question I have, he replied. How is Naruto so strong? He has no clan, no family to teach him, and yet, he's able to match me in spars, when I not only train hard, but have my whole clan to help me grow stronger. Kaseki laughed aloud. If there's one thing I've learned, Sasuke, it's that you don't need a clan or a bloodline to be strong. Naruto is strong, because he is determined. He pushes himself every day to be stronger than he was the day before. Originally he did it so that when he was strong, people would acknowledge him, acknowledge he exists, instead of ignoring him like they were doing. Now though, he wants to be strong not for himself, but so he can help his friends, and his teachers. That is why Naruto is so strong. He's training and fighting for more than just himself. At that, Sasuke blinked. Oh, I see, he remarked. He's like me. He's fighting for his friends, and I'm fighting for my clan, said Sasuke. I guess that makes us strong. They reached the clan chief's residence before Kaseki could reply, and Makoto was waiting for them at the door with some sort of unidentified sixth sense her mother had given her. She raced over to give her son a quick hug while grinning. Oh Sasuke, it's so good to have you back, she said, giving him a strong hug. Kaseki simply sighed, but Sasuke grinned and gave his mother a hug. Though Sasuke may have believed that he and Naruto were alike, that was untrue. Though noble in intent, Sasuke's motivations stemmed from a sense of arrogance that Fugaku Uchiha had ingrained in him, the belief that the Uchiha were and always must be the best. Sasuke fought for the clan to preserve the clan's reputation rather than to defend the clan members. Besides, he needs to track Itachi down and return him to Konoha so that justice can be served. After Sasuke's protracted mission, she let the two reunite by shaking her head and moving on. The following day, while Shikamaru simply sighed, Ino watched Choji tear into his plate of barbecue and smiled gently. She laughed and said, "It's good to see your appetite hasn't changed, Choji." But all Choji could do was smile and chew his food. Shikamaru muttered, "You should hear Asuma Sensei sometimes. He's constantly on Choji to eat less and work harder. It's so troublesome," then turned to face Ino. He looked between Ino and Sakura, who were both with them, and said, "So your team and Team 7 just got back from a C-ranked mission turned A-ranked, huh?" Inoichi learned that Sakura had reacted similarly to Ino upon returning home from her visit with Sakura's parents. Inoichi had therefore advised Sakura spend time with Ino and her friends in order to help her cope, after assisting them in understanding why she had reacted that way. Sakura's purpose for being there, then. With a quick glance down, Ino nodded. "Yeah, we did," she replied, taking a slow sip of her tea as Sakura and the two boys gazed at them and Choji stopped eating. "Was it bad?" Choji inquired a little tensely, which made Ino shrug. "It turned out okay. None of us got hurt," Ino said, continuing to stare at her tea while Sakura cast a downward glance at her hands. Watching the two, Shikamaru gave a quiet nod. His father confirmed to him what Inoichi had said, namely that Sakura and Ino were still coping with witnessing a great deal of death and in some cases even contributing to it. In addition to helping the girls out, he had told his son that Shikamaru and Choji would gain some experience from spending time with them that would be useful when they actually had to fight and kill people. Shikamaru would normally find the whole thing problematic, but he had been acquainted with Ino for a while. He would lend her a hand if he could. She was a friend. Unfortunately, Choji actually spoke up first before he could do anything. He questioned, "What happened?" His voice was questioning, but not in an exuberant kind of way. He could tell it had alarmed their friends, so the tone was more worried. Sakura cast a sidelong glance at the two girls as they exchanged quick glances. She stated, "We don't want to ruin things here," not wanting to disturb them with their issues. "Wondering if you two are okay would be more troublesome," Shikamaru remarked. He said, "We want to help, right Choji? We're your friends, so you can tell us," to which Choji nodded in agreement. After exchanging glances with the other girl, Ino sighed quietly. "It's just challenging," she muttered. She asked her two male friends, "You know that the three of us spent our childhood listening to our dads talk about their missions and adventures?" She went on when they nodded. "But, they never told us about the people they killed, have they? They never talked about the dead and the blood, that part of the stories they always left out." Shikamaru sighed lightly as Ino went on. "The most terrible aspect is the nightmares or dreams," she muttered. I see the men we killed in my sleep, just lying there, staring at me," she said. Sakura nodded beside her, shivering as well. They had us kill those chickens you know, in school. But, it's really not the same," Ino replied. Shikamaru nodded. No, I'm guessing it wouldn't be, would it? Sakura and Ino just nodded silently until Choji comforted her by touching Ino's hand. Ino. That's just terrible, Choji murmured. I wish I knew what to say, Ino said, shrugging slightly and lowering her gaze. All Shikamaru could do was sigh. You know Ino, Choji and we don't have any experience with this kind of stuff. But I can say this. As troublesome as it is, we're your friends. And if you ever need to come talk to someone, or just hang out, or need a shoulder to cry on, well I guess we're here, right Choji? Yeah, what Shikamaru said, smiled Choji. We're here to help you, any way we can. So if you two need someone, just come find us. Ino looked up and smiled a little. Thank you guys, she uttered. She had to admit, just hearing the guys show support made her feel a little better, so she said, that means a lot. A small amount, but not very much. Sakura looked up, feeling slightly relieved by their assistance as well. Ino inhaled deeply as she made an effort to relax. So let's move on from that depressing subject. What have you guys been up to? Shino being an okay teammate? She inquired. Shikamaru sat back, mentally scowling as he watched Ino and Sakura, and he gently prodded Choji with his elbow, allowing the bigger boy to respond. Of them all, Ino had always been the most gregarious and self-assured. It was strange and unsettling to witness her being shaken so severely. Silently, he hoped that he and Choji would handle their first experiences with death and killing as well as she appeared to. With a mental sigh, he leaned forward and joined in as Choji told the girls about the time Shino tried to catch insects drawn to Choji's food, and Choji continued to run away from them. He felt a little relieved to see the smiles on the faces of both girls. In another scene, Naruto let out a grunt as he used his ninjutsu to block Yugito's katana, drawing the blade back before she could twist the weapon's 3 blades and send it flying out of his hand. As Yugito moved to attack Kaseki, he ducked under a swipe from Kaseki and her tanto, back, flipping away to buy himself a little breathing room. A split second later, he was forced to duck out of the way as one of Hinata's training arrows flew directly past his head. With a quick hop, he did a back handstand and avoided another arrow. While this was going on, Anko observed as 3 assassins and 1 assassin recruit engaged in a free dot-for-dot all combat to test their situational awareness and flexibility. Nodding, she watched Hinata advance with her short sword, watching her sister spin around and avoid Naruto's side strike before thrusting back at Yugito. This caused the Nibi Jinchuriki to duck back and stop Kaseki's overhead blow before Kaseki threw a training kunai at Naruto, who just managed to avoid it. Anko clapped her hands as the 4 split up, each taking a corner of the sparring floor, panting lightly and observing each other. She said, "That's enough for now," and continued. "Take a break. I need to talk to Naruto and Hinata about something," she replied. After blinking in shock, Naruto and Hinata approached Anko, who was taking a scroll out of one of her pouches. She smiled and said, "I've got a surprise for one of you," as she watched Tomo, Naruto's fox, come trotting over from where he had been sitting, observing them spar, and settle down next to him. Raphael found this scroll in Nami while infiltrating Gato's mansion, she explained. This is a summoning contract. By signing your name and leaving your fingerprints in blood on it, you're able to summon the entities tied to this contract from their dimension. If they agree to work with you, they can aid you in various ways. They're not exactly something any shinobi can use, as they're very rare, and each group can be very picky on whom they serve. But I have a feeling one of you two might be able to do it." Hinata attempted to glance at the scroll, but Naruto just blinked at that. As Anko turned the scroll over, she inquired, "Which summoning group does this contract belong to?" "That's the interesting part. They're called Fennec Foxes apparently. The latter part of the name is obvious, but not sure about the first part," she continued. "Fennec Foxes, huh?" inquired Naruto. "Are you sure it's not a bit cliché for the guy with the pet fox and the kitsune-themed biju in his belly to have a fox-based summoning contract?" As Hinata pointed out to Naruto, "Actually, it might help you out more than it would me," she said. The young fox next to Naruto blinked and tilted his head to one side as his tail wagged every time Hinata called his name. "I'll admit, I'm intrigued by the idea of having a summoning contract. But given that it's fox-themed, I'm betting they're a tracking-based group of summoning animals. I have my Byakugan for that, while you've got Tomo. But since he's still being trained, it might be a good idea for you to sign it so you can have them," she chuckled. After giving his chin a brief, thoughtful stroke, Naruto nodded. "That makes sense," he grinned and stated. "So let's do this then." Anko gave the scroll to him, and as he unrolled it, he sneezed, kicking up dust that got lodged in the ancient scroll. Only one of the several vertical slots for potential summoners to sign their names was filled. But the name was somewhat unreadable due to its age and smudging. After clearing the next area of any dust or debris, Naruto shrugged and bit his thumb until it bled. He started writing his name in blood, then his fingerprints at the bottom were covered in blood. When Anko saw that he was done, she nodded. Anko said, rubbing her back sheepishly as Naruto's head shot up. Good, now we wait for the blood to dry, and you can start practicing on summoning them. If they end up accepting you, you'll be their new summoner. But if they reject you, well, they might either just take the summoning scroll, or they might attack you. It varies from summoning group to group. Wait, attack me? You didn't say anything about that, he argued. Anko remarked, I said might, Gaki. Might. Anyways, we should go somewhere more open to practice. Who knows how big these guys are, she added. Hinata, why don't you stay and keep practicing with Yugito and Kaseki? Naruto and I will handle his summoning training. Yes, sensei, Hinata replied, turning to face the two more senior assassins. Naruto and Anko departed, with Tomo gladly trailing behind. With haste, they both grabbed the rooftops and made their way to the training area. Anko turned to her fair-haired male student when they discovered one that was empty. She showed him the hand signs and said, Okay, Gaki, this summoning jutsu is pretty easy. Just draw some blood again, use these hand signs while channeling chakra, and slam your hand down on the ground. Naruto started to mimic her actions, carefully going through each one, learning the hand signs and using them. She nodded and took a step back when he eventually managed to perform them quickly multiple times. Alright, give it a shot. But I'd suggest putting a good amount of chakra into the technique. Naruto nodded, inhaled deeply, and then bit his thumb once more. After making all the hand gestures, he lifted his hand and slammed it down. Kachiyose no Jutsu. Summoning technique. Naruto scowled and went through the motions once more, but nothing changed. When nothing happened again, he scowled and repeated the action multiple times. Anko approached him shortly after his sixth attempt, at which point he let out a frustrated cry and tried again, using a lot more chakra. Where his hand touched the ground, a cloud of smoke billowed forth, resembling a ceiling array. The smoke nearly swallowed Naruto, making him cough and draw back his hand. Blinking, Anko saw nothing but Naruto's head in the smoke. A tiny animal was visible standing where the ceiling array had been as the smoke cleared. Its name suggested that it had a fox-like appearance, but it was smaller than most foxes and had enormous ears. This specific fennec fox had dark brown fur with creamy white fur covering its four paws, running from its lower jaw along the underside of its body, and a white tip to its tail. The large brown eyes of the said fox were blinking as it looked around, its ears moving and twitching in search of sounds. Hearing Naruto cough, it turned and froze, staring up at him with a tense expression on its face. When Naruto noticed it, he grinned a little awkwardly and was about to say hello when it gave a terrified little yip and vanished into a much smaller cloud of smoke. Anko blinked and laughed a little, while Naruto just stared at the cloud of smoke. Her words, well, that could have gone better, came as she walked up to Naruto. Naruto merely gave her a blink. He asked, do they normally do that? But Anko just shook her head. Not all of them. The first snake I summoned tried to eat me. I had to beat it off in order to prove my worth as their summoner. Every snake I've ever summoned, I defeated in a fight. That's how I proved myself worthy to them, she continued. Well, maybe I should try summoning again, or, he said, yelling as a sizable cloud of smoke suddenly appeared around them and quickly dispersed to reveal dozens of fennec foxes. The majority of these, however, were much larger than the one Naruto had summoned. They ranged in size from medium-sized dogs to wolves, in contrast to that one. Some of the larger ones bore scars or injuries from previous battles, but all of them had different colored fur and some even wore clothing. Among them, the biggest one had a scar on his nose and a portion of his left ear missing. However, the smaller, silver-furred fennec fox perched on the largest one's back caught Anko and Naruto's attention. After silently observing the two, the fox uttered words in a deep, manly voice. I am the elder Kakashi, listener of the fennec fox tribe. Which of you is the summoner? He asked. Naruto looked around, at the different foxes encircling them, and then he started talking. I am, he declared as he moved forward. I'm the one who signed the contract. Leaping off the larger fox's back, Kakashi walked up to Naruto and observed him. It has been many, many years since my tribe had a summoner. Tell me, young human. What makes you think you are worthy of summoning us? He inquired. Biting his lip, Naruto did so. Well, I'm not sure, he remarked frank. I do not know what you'd expect of someone for them to be worthy enough to be your summoner. And for me to try and say otherwise would simply mean I'm either a liar or a fool. Kakashi gave a little bark of laughter. After saying, a statement that is wiser than you might think, he got down and walked over to Naruto. He blinked as he started to sniff the air. You smell quite unique, boy. I smell kitsune upon you. As well as, the scent of another, one who almost smells of kin, and yet doesn't. What is it I smell? He inquired. Naruto said, well, the kitsune you're smelling is probably because I'm the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, which caused the fennec foxes to all start barking or yipping in shock. However, Kakashi's stern bark silenced them all. The foxes fell silent once more, and Naruto went on. The other you smell, well perhaps it's Tomo. He's my pet fox, who I found when I was younger and adopted. I'd like to meet this Tomo. It intrigues me that his scent on you is that of kin. But as for Kyuubi, we know well of Kyuubi. It is an entity that has helped cause much suspicion on my kind in the past. Many people associate us with it, because of how similar foxes like us and kitsune like it are. We have reason to not trust it, but we have reason to respect it as well. It is truly powerful. To find a vessel of it as our summoner, I must say, you intrigue me greatly. What is your name? Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki, Kakashi nodded in response to the blonde Jinchuriki. Naruto Uzumaki. Please bring this Tomo here tomorrow at this time. We will speak with him and then judge if you're worthy of being our summoner. In the meantime, please do not attempt to summon us again, Kakashi instructed his fellow foxes before barking. A thick cloud of smoke engulfed them all, leaving Naruto and Anko by themselves. Anko stepped forward to greet Naruto, who was wiping smoke from his face. She grinned and said, well, that went better than my first summoning. But Naruto appeared grave. He asked softly, a little apprehensive about their motivations for wanting to meet Tomo. Why are they interested in Tomo? He doesn't look like a fennec fox, so how can he smell like kin to them? Losing the small fox, who served as both his first true friend and family, would be tragic. Anko gave a quiet laugh. Well, he does sort of have their ears in a way, she replied. Don't worry Naruto, I'm sure they won't hurt him or anything. If you're so worried, boy, it would be easier to just ignore them and cast the summoning contract aside, Kyuubi said in his head. Though it would be a shame to lose a potentially useful group of allies over simple fear. I do not know what these rodents can truly offer, but their services will most likely be valuable. Before responding mentally, Naruto blinked. It seems like you don't really like them, he thought to himself. I have no like, except for my fellow kin and the few of you hairless apes that have managed to impress me without making me loathe them. But I will respect that these foxes may provide help, if they find you worthy. Of course, if you simply let loose some of my power, they would fear you and likely follow you out of terror of what you might unleash upon them, Kyuubi said in a less joyful tone. Naruto just let out a small cry of frustration. Yes, let's designate that as Plan B. However, they won't attempt to murder me because of you, will they? Kyuubi shut down his mental connection to Naruto and said, I doubt it. I never interacted with them, as far as I know, and besides, even if they wanted to attack you, I would ensure they'd be dead for it. And they more than likely know it, so you'll be safe. Though I would miss the chance for some amusement. One can only enjoy chasing imaginary prey and destroying fake cities for so long before one becomes bored. Naruto sighed, already picturing Kyuubi trotting through his corner of Naruto's mindscape. It had been Naruto's first act of friendship, or at the very least his offer to the Kyuubi to declare a ceasefire. He had made an effort to make his mindscape less dismal and more livable. Most of Naruto's mindscape had taken on the appearance of the assassin headquarters, with his knowledge and memories stashed away in books on shelves. But Kyuubi's portion had been transformed into a woodland environment, complete with imaginary villages and animals that he could use as a vent for his frustration, rage. Thus far, it has increased Kyuubi's willingness to talk to Naruto, albeit usually to make fun of him or whoever he was chatting with or thinking about. With a sigh, Naruto shook his head and glanced at Anko, who was staring at him funny. Just Kyuubi making some comments, he stated. Anko handed Naruto the rolled up scroll and said, okay, so why don't you go back to the warehouse? I'm going to go check on Ino and Sakura. With a nod, Naruto accepted the scroll. He turned and headed off, saying, right. See you later, Anko. Sensei. Anko laughed softly and turned to go in a different direction. Unknown place a figure was looking up at the armored man in front of him after silently considering the report in front of them. So. Gato is dead, the manly sounding figure exclaimed. That is quite a shame. The armored figure said, as the now named Ichigawa stood. Indeed, Ichigawa. Dono. We've also received reports that several of the villages he took as part of the plan have since fallen out of the hands of his company. We will no longer be able to utilize them when the time comes. It is a setback, but not one that cannot be overcome. We will simply need to bide our time. However, I am worried about the ones who brought about Gato's end. Are they the same ones who have been hounding his efforts for the past few years? He inquired. We do not know. The ones who defeated Gato were Konoha shinobi. Whether it's Konoha who's been investigating him or another group, we do not know at this time, the man in armor said. Very well, in the end, it doesn't matter. Gato's role was not truly necessary. Simply a means for him to perhaps prove his family's former worth once again. However, take what happened to him and his family to heart. His death is simply an example of what has happened to this world, and how the natural order has been unbalanced. Remember, we will correct it, Ichigawa concluded. The figure nodded and said, yes, Ichigawa. Dono, before walking away. Ichigawa, in the meantime, just turned to the elemental nation's map. He took a pen and traced a thin circle around Konoha's emblem in Hai no Kuni. He mutely remarked, your time will come, Konoha. Oh yes, your time will come.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.